Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Vincent Grimwald, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 8 years now. People think being a ranger is just about giving directions to lost hikers and putting out campfires, but they're wrong. Way wrong. I came to these mountains after the war in Korea. Saw things there that still wake me up in cold sweats. Things that made me swear off carrying guns forever. The mountains were supposed to be peaceful, quiet, a place where a man could forget the sound of screaming and the smell of burning flesh. For 8 years, it worked. I had my little cabin near Cataract Falls, deep in the backcountry where most folks never go. 20 miles from the nearest road, no phone, no radio, most days. Just me and the trees and the animals, the way I liked it. I was good at my job, real good. The army taught me how to track, and these mountains taught me patience. When hunters came crying about Bigfoot stealing their deer, I'd roll my eyes and explain how bears sometimes walk on 2 legs. When campers swore they heard something huge moving through the woods at night, I'd tell them about elk and their heavy footsteps. Bigfoot was just bears walking upright, I'd say. Desperate people seeing monsters where there were only animals. I believed that. God help me, I really believed that. It was late November when everything went to hell. Hunting season was almost over, and most of the weekend warriors had gone home. The trees were bare, their branches reaching up like skeleton fingers. It should have been cold, but the weather was all wrong, warm and sticky, with thick fog that hung around like smoke. I was checking the area around Devil's Throat Gorge, a nasty piece of land where the earth just opens up into a 2,000-foot drop. Cherokee folks used to say it was cursed, but then again, they said that about a lot of places. The gorge had limestone caves running through it like a honeycomb, and sometimes hikers got stupid and tried to explore them. That's what I thought had happened to the 3 missing people from last week. College kids from Tennessee probably fell into a hole somewhere. I was supposed to find them, or at least find what was left of them. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. No birds, no squirrels chattering, no bugs humming. Just thick, heavy silence that pressed against my ears like cotton. Even my boots on the dead leaves sounded too loud. Then I smelled it. Meat, rotten meat, sweet and sick in the warm air, made my stomach turn over, reminded me of Korea, of bodies left in the sun too long. I followed the smell, my tracking instincts kicking in, even though part of me wanted to turn around and walk away. That's when I found it. A human ribcage, picked clean and white, hanging from a tree branch 15 feet off the ground. I stood there staring up at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The bones swayed a little in the windless air, clicking together like wind chimes. Around the base of the tree, scattered in the leaves, I could see more bones. Arm bones, leg bones, a skull with the jaw missing, and dog tags, Korean war dog tags, just like the ones I'd buried in my cabin drawer. My hands shook as I picked up one of the tags and read the name stamped into the metal. Jimmy Kowalski, Unit 7th Infantry Division. Jimmy had been my best friend in Korea, my foxhole buddy. The guy who shared his last cigarette with me before we went over the hill at Pork Chop. The guy I'd left behind when the Chinese came screaming down on us with bayonets. The guy who'd been dead for 15 years. I don't know how long I stood there holding Jimmy's dog tag. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. My brain kept trying to make sense of it, coming up with explanations that didn't make me sound crazy. Maybe Jimmy had survived Korea. Maybe he'd come to the mountains like me, looking for peace. Maybe he'd had an accident, fallen into the gorge, and wild animals had scattered his bones. But that didn't explain how his ribcage got 15 feet up in a tree. I forced myself to think like a ranger, not like a scared veteran. I took out my camera and started documenting everything. The bones, the dog tags, the claw marks I was just now noticing in the tree bark. Deep gouges, like something with knives for fingers, had climbed straight up. Too big for a bear, too deep for a mountain lion. Too high for anything that should be living in these mountains. I was taking pictures when I heard the scream. Human. Male. Coming from deeper in the gorge. echoing off the rock walls so I couldn't tell exactly where. But definitely human and definitely in trouble. I ran toward the sound, crashing through the underbrush, following a path that seemed to go straight down into the earth. The screaming got louder as I got closer, then suddenly cut off with a wet, tearing sound that made my skin crawl. I found him, at the bottom of a natural bowl in the limestone, maybe 50 feet across. Another college kid, probably one of the missing 3. He was still alive, but barely. Something had taken a bite out of his leg that was so big I could see the bone. Blood was everywhere, soaking into the ground, painting the white rocks. "Help me," he whispered when he saw me. "Please, God, help me." I was already moving, pulling out my first aid kit, trying to stop the bleeding. But as I worked, I could feel something watching us. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and the kid's eyes went wide with terror, looking over my shoulder. "It's coming back," he said. "Oh God, it's coming back." I turned around. 15 feet away, something huge stood between 2 trees. At first, my brain tried to make it into a bear. Dark fur, massive shoulders, standing on its back legs. But bears don't stand 12 feet tall. Bears don't have arms that hang down to their knees. And bears definitely don't to have faces that look almost human, with eyes that burn like coals and teeth as long as my fingers. It looked at me for maybe 3 seconds, looked right into my eyes like it was measuring me, deciding if I was worth the trouble. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound that was part roar, part scream, and part something else. Something that reminded me of the sounds Chinese soldiers made when they were dying. The kid behind me started screaming again. The thing took 1 step toward us, and the ground shook like a small earthquake. Another step, and I could smell its breath, rotten meat, and something else. Something that made me think of fear and pain and the worst night of my life in Korea. I grabbed the kid under his arms and started dragging him backward toward the path I'd come down. He was heavier than he looked, and the blood made him slippery. The thing kept coming, taking its time, like it knew we couldn't get away. "Leave me," the kid whispered. "Just leave me and run." For a second, I almost did. For a second, I was back in Korea, listening to Jimmy scream as the Chinese overran our position, and I was running, always running, leaving my friends behind to save my own skin. But I couldn't do it again. Not again. I kept dragging him, step by step, while the thing followed us. It wasn't trying to catch us. It was hurting us, pushing us toward something. I could see more bones scattered around, some fresh, some old. This whole area was a killing ground. We made it maybe 20 feet before I tripped over something and went down hard. The kid rolled away from me, crying and begging. I looked back to see what I'd tripped over. Another body. This one had been dead longer, maybe a few days. But I recognized the uniform. Korean War surplus, the kind you could buy at Army-Navy stores. The kind Jimmy always wore because it reminded him of when we were young and stupid and thought we were heroes. The thing was right behind us, now. I could feel its breath on my neck, hot and wet. I rolled over to face it and found myself looking up at something that shouldn't exist. Something out of nightmares and old stories, with hunger in its eyes and blood on its claws. It reached down for the wounded kid, ignoring me completely. Its hands were bigger than dinner plates, with fingers that ended in black claws. The kid screamed one more time as those hands closed around him. Then the screaming stopped. I ran. God forgive me. I ran again. I made it back to my cabin as the sun was going down, shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the lock. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress, maybe. PTSD flashback. 8 years in the mountains, and maybe the isolation was finally getting to me. But I still had Jimmy's dog tag in my pocket. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at it while the whiskey burned my throat. James P. Kowalski, B positive, Methodist. Born 1930, which would make him 37 now if he was still alive. But Jimmy had died in Korea. I'd seen his body myself, torn apart by Chinese grenades. Hadn't I? The more I thought about it, the fuzzier my memories got. War does that to you. Shows you so much horror that your brain starts blocking things out just to keep you sane. Maybe Jimmy hadn't died. Maybe he'd been wounded, sent home, and I'd never known. Maybe he'd come to the mountains just like me. I was still trying to convince myself of that when I heard the whispers. Quiet voices outside my cabin, speaking in Korean. The same words Chinese soldiers used to shout when they charged our lines. Words that still woke me up screaming sometimes. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window. Nothing out there but trees and shadows. But the whispers kept going, circling the cabin like wolves. Myoga handa. We will eat. Jugida, kill. Go room. Suffering, I knew those words. Knew them from the worst night of my life. When the Chinese broke through our lines and Jimmy was screaming for help and I was running, always running, the whispers followed me when I tried to go to bed. They followed me when I checked the locks on my doors. They followed me into my dreams, where I was back in Korea and something huge was hunting me through the trenches. I woke up at dawn with Korean words in my mouth and blood under my fingernails. That's when I knew I had to go back. The body of the college kid was gone when I returned to the feeding ground. So was the other one I'd tripped over. But there were drag marks in the dirt, leading toward a cave opening I hadn't noticed before. The entrance was partially blocked with human bones, not randomly scattered, but carefully arranged like a barrier, or a warning. I had to move 3 femurs and a skull to get inside. My flashlight beam showed a tunnel that went back into the mountain, sloping down, into darkness. The walls were covered with scratches, some fresh, some old. Some looked like claw marks, others looked like they'd been made by fingernails, by people trying to climb out. The smell got worse as I went deeper. Rotten meat and fear sweat and something else, something that reminded me of the breath I'd felt on my neck yesterday. 20 feet in, I found the feeding chamber. It was a natural cave room, maybe 30 feet across, with a ceiling so high my flashlight couldn't reach it. The floor was covered with bones from a dozen different people, maybe more. Some still had scraps of clothing attached. Korean War surplus, Vietnam fatigues, modern hiking gear, and hanging from metal spikes driven into the walls, like some kind of sick trophy room, were dog tags, dozens of them. All military, all from wars going back decades. In the center of the room, 3 metal posts stuck up from the ground. 2 of them had chains attached, with cuffs that could hold a man's wrists. The 3rd post was empty, but the chains were fresh and the metal was clean, waiting for the next victim. I was backing toward the tunnel when I heard breathing behind me, slow and deep, like a sleeping giant. I turned around and saw eyes in the darkness, red eyes, burning like embers, watching me from a ledge 20 feet up the wall. The thing was bigger than I'd thought yesterday. 15 feet tall at least, with shoulders wide enough to fill a doorway. It was covered in dark fur, but underneath I could see muscles that looked strong enough to tear a car in half. Its face was the worst part, almost human, but wrong in every way that mattered. Too big, too cruel, with teeth that belonged in the mouth of a shark. Vincent, it said in a voice like grinding stone. Vincent Grimwald, it knew my name. You left him to die. It continued, and now the voice sounded like Jimmy. You left me to die in Korea, and now you've come to join me. I ran, again, always running. But this time, it followed. I could hear it behind me as I scrambled through the tunnel, its claws scraping against stone, its breathing getting closer. My flashlight beam bounced everywhere as I ran, showing me glimpses of more scratches on the walls, more bones scattered in the dirt. I made it outside, just as something grabbed my ankle. Claws like knife blades cut through my boot, and I kicked frantically, connecting with something solid. The thing let go with a roar that shook rocks loose from the cave ceiling. I didn't stop running until I was back at my cabin, and even then I kept looking over my shoulder. That night, the whispers were louder. More voices, speaking Korean and English and languages I didn't recognize. All of them saying the same thing: come back. Come feed us. Come die with honor. I sat in my kitchen with all the lights on, drinking coffee and trying to stay awake. Because every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that cave, chained to a metal post, waiting for something huge and hungry to tear me apart. Just like Jimmy had been waiting 15 years ago. Just like he was still waiting. The next morning, another ranger found me. Marcus Stone, a good kid from Tennessee who'd been on the job for 2 years. He'd come looking for me because I'd missed my radio check-in, and he was worried. "Vince, you look like hell," he said when he saw me. "When's the last time you slept?" I tried to explain what I'd found, but the words came out all wrong. Giant monster in the cave, bodies hanging from trees, Korean War veterans being eaten alive. Even to me, it sounded crazy. Marcus listened with the patient look people get when they're dealing with someone who's lost their mind. Maybe you should take some time off, he suggested. Get some rest, see a doctor. I'm not crazy, I said. Come with me. I'll show you. He didn't want to, but I was his supervisor, and he was a good kid who followed orders. We went back to Devil's Throat Gorge together, and I showed him the claw marks on the trees, the scattered bones, the cave entrance. Jesus, Marcus whispered when he saw the feeding chamber. What kind of animal does this? But even as he said it, I could see the change starting in him. His eyes got distant, unfocused. He started talking about things that hadn't happened. Missions in Vietnam, friends who died in battles he'd never fought. The thing was in his head now, just like it had been in mine since Korea. Marcus, I said, grabbing his shoulders. Stay with me. Don't listen to the voices. But it was too late. He walked deeper into the cave like he was sleepwalking, toward the metal posts in the center of the chamber. His hands found the chains, and he started fastening them around his own wrists. It's not so bad, he said in a voice that wasn't quite his own. Dying for your country, dying with honor, better than running away like a vorster, coward. The last word hit me like a punch in the gut, because that's what I was, a coward. I'd run from Korea, run from my nightmares, run from everything that scared me. And now Marcus was going to die because I was too scared to fight. I heard breathing from the darkness above us. The thing was coming. Marcus, listen to me, I said, working at the chains on his wrists. This isn't real. You're not a soldier. You've never been to war. Yes, I have, he said sadly. We all have, all of us who carry the guilt. The breathing got closer. I could smell that rotten meat stench getting stronger. In the shadows at the edge of my flashlight beam, I could see something huge moving down the cave wall. You came back, it said in Jimmy's voice. I knew you would. Cowards always come back to face their guilt in the end. It dropped from the wall with a sound like thunder, landing between me and the tunnel entrance. 15 feet of fur and muscle and nightmare, with Jimmy's face stretched over a skull too big for any human. You left me in Korea, it said, left me screaming for help while you ran to save your own skin. That's not how it happened, I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. The memories were so mixed up, so confused. Had I really tried to save Jimmy, or had I just run the first chance I got? You know the truth, the thing said, moving closer. You've always known. That's why you came to the mountains. That's why you refused to carry weapons. That's why you wake up screaming every night. It was right. God help me, it was right. I had left Jimmy behind, I had run like a coward, and I'd been running ever since. But I can end the running, it continued. I can end the guilt. All you have to do is stay. Feed me your shame, your fear, your regret. Die the death you should have died in Korea. Marcus was still struggling with the chains, but weaker now, like he was giving up. His eyes were closed, and he was mumbling words in Vietnamese. A war he'd never fought in, for a country he'd never seen. I looked around the cave and saw them all. Jimmy's bones and dozens of others. All the men who'd come to the mountains carrying guilt and shame and memories they couldn't live with. All of them fed to something that grew stronger with every veteran it consumed. No, I said. The thing tilted its massive head. No, no more running. I reached into my pack and pulled out the one thing I'd sworn never to touch again, my service pistol from Korea. I'd kept it all these years, hidden in my cabin, a reminder of everything I wanted to forget. Guns can't hurt me, the thing said. I am guilt made flesh. I am consequence given form. As long as you carry shame, I cannot die. It was right, but I wasn't planning to shoot it. I put the gun to my own head. If I die, I said, Marcus goes free. The guilt dies with me. The thing's eyes widened. You would not dare. Watch me. For the first time since Korea, I felt something that wasn't fear or shame or regret. I felt purpose. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end. Maybe this was the death I should have died 15 years ago. My finger tightened on the trigger. Wait, the thing said. There is another way. The thing told me about the old Cherokee stories, about the Kekle Kudle, the cannibal giants who fed on those who had abandoned their duties, their families, their honor. It told me how the Cherokee had dealt with such creatures, Not with bullets or blades, but with truth. Face what you did, it said. Accept the guilt, but do not let it consume you. Transform it into something useful. Become the man you should have been. I lowered the gun. Not because I was scared, but because I finally understood. I had left Jimmy in Korea. I had run when my friends needed me most. I had been a coward, and men had died because of it. Those were facts, and denying them had only fed the thing's power over me. But that didn't mean I had to keep being a coward. I unlocked Marcus's chains and helped him to his feet. He was confused, disoriented, but alive. Together, we walked out of the cave and back into the sunlight. The thing didn't follow us. It couldn't, because I wasn't running anymore. That was 3 months ago. Marcus doesn't remember much about that day. His mind has blocked out most of it, which is probably for the best. The official report blamed the missing hikers on bear attacks, and the cave was sealed up for public safety. I'm still a ranger, but my job has changed. Word gets around, especially among veterans, about a place in the mountains where a man can come to face his demons. I help them when I can. Some of them need medical attention, some need counseling, and some just need someone who understands what it's like to carry guilt that feels heavier than your own body. I don't know if the thing in the cave is really dead. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear whispers in Korean. But they don't scare me anymore. Guilt is like any other weight. If you carry it right, it can make you stronger instead of breaking your back. The mountains are peaceful again. The birds are singing, the animals are moving through the forest, and hikers can explore Devil's Throat Gorge without worrying about anything worse than a twisted ankle. But I keep my service pistol with me now. Not because I'm afraid of the thing in the cave, but because there are other mountains, other caves, other places where guilt and shame gather like shadows. And someone needs to be ready when the next veteran comes looking for peace, only to find something hungry waiting in the darkness. Some monsters are real, but the worst ones are the ones we feed ourselves. My name is Eleanor Ravenshollow, and I need to tell you what happened to me in Blackwater Hollow. I'm a park ranger, or was, anyway. 3 years on the job, fresh out of forestry school, and I thought I knew everything about the woods. I was wrong. It was early spring of 1959 when they sent me to Canaan Valley, way up in the Monongahela National Forest. Most folks avoided that area. Too remote, they said, too dangerous. The old mining company had torn up the land something fierce back in the 40s, then just walked away when the coal ran out. Left behind a mess of dead trees, orange water, and stories nobody wanted to tell. I didn't mind the isolation. Truth is, I preferred it. Growing up in a mining family teaches you that people can hurt you worse than any wild animal. My daddy died of black lung when I was 16, coughing up blood until there was nothing left of him but bones and regret. I swore I'd never go underground like him. That's why I became a ranger. Trees don't lie to you. Mountains don't make promises they can't keep. My assignment was simple: test the water quality in Blackwater Hollow and document the environmental damage. The government was finally thinking about cleaning up the old mining sites, but they needed to know how bad things really were. I had my testing kit, my camera, and 3 weeks to write a report that would probably end up in some filing cabinet in Washington. The first thing that hit me when I got to the hollow was the smell. Sulfur, thick and rotten, like eggs left in the sun. The creek ran bright orange from all the acid drainage, and nothing grew on its banks except some scraggly weeds that looked half dead. The trees were bare skeletons, their bark peeled off in long strips. Even in early spring, when everything should have been turning green, this place looked like winter had never left. I set up my camp about a quarter mile from where the old company town used to be. Nothing left now but some concrete, foundations, and a rusty water tower with Blackwater Mining Co. painted on the side in faded letters. The company had built houses here for the workers and their families. Probably 200 people lived here once, kids playing in the streets, women hanging laundry on lines, men coming home dirty from the mines. Now it was just me and the wind. The first night, I heard children laughing. I was sitting by my campfire, writing notes about the water samples I'd taken that day, when the sound drifted down from the old town site. High, sweet voices echoing off the hills. My first thought was that some local kids had hiked in to explore the ruins. Happened all the time in other parks. Kids love abandoned places. But when I walked up to check, I didn't see anyone. Just empty foundations and that rusty water tower creaking in the breeze. The laughing had stopped. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone there?" Nothing but my own voice bouncing back at me. I told myself it was just the wind. Sound plays tricks in these hollow valleys, especially at night. Maybe it was an owl or a fox, or just my imagination working overtime. I'd been alone in the woods for 2 days already. That can mess with your head if you're not used to it. But as I walked back to my camp, I heard it again. Fainter this time, like it was coming from deeper in the hollow. Children singing some old song I almost remembered. Something my grandmother used to hum while she cooked. I stopped walking and listened hard, but the song faded away before I could make out the words. That night, I dreamed about my father. He was young again, heading off to work with his lunch pail and his helmet lamp. In the dream, he kept looking back at me, like he wanted to say something important. But every time he opened his mouth, all that came out was the sound of children singing. I woke up with tears on my face and the taste of coal dust in my mouth. The next morning, I got down to business. Water testing is boring work, but it has to be done right. I worked my way up the creek, taking samples every 50 yards, measuring temperature and acidity levels. The numbers were worse than I'd expected. This water could kill you if you drank enough of it. I was about halfway to the mine entrance when I found the playground. It was tucked back in a grove of dead pines, hidden from the main trail. Swings, a slide, a merry-go-round, all painted in bright colors that should have faded years ago. But they looked fresh, like someone had just finished touching up the paint. The swings moved gently in the breeze, their chains squeaking, a rhythm that sounded almost like music. I checked my map. This area had been the school and playground for the company town. Made sense that some of the equipment would still be here. What didn't make sense was the condition it was in. I walked closer and noticed other things. Jump ropes laid out in perfect circles. Hopscotch squares drawn in, fresh chalk on a patch of concrete. A row of lunch pails sitting on a bench, each one labeled with a child's name in careful handwriting. Tommy Morrison, Sarah Kellum, Billy Hutchins, Mary Catherine Odell. The names meant nothing to me, but something about seeing them made my chest tight. I picked up one of the lunch pails Tommy's and opened it. Inside was a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, an apple, and a thermos of milk. The sandwich looked fresh, like someone had made it that morning. I dropped the lunch pail. It hit the ground with a clang that echoed through the dead trees. "Hello?" I called out again. "Is someone here? Kids, if you're playing a game, it's not funny. This place isn't safe." No answer, but I could swear I heard whispers coming from behind the school building. I followed the sound around to the back of the ruins, where the foundation stones made a rough rectangle in the weeds. The whispers got louder as I got closer, but I still couldn't make out words. It sounded like children telling secrets, the way kids do when they don't want adults to hear. In the middle of the foundation, someone had arranged a dozen small stones in a perfect circle. Fresh flowers, where did flowers come from in this dead place, sat in the center of the circle, and scratched into the dirt around the stones were words in a child's careful printing. "We are still here." My hands started shaking. I took out my camera and snapped pictures of everything: the playground, the lunch pails, the stone circle, the message in the dirt. Whatever was going on here, I needed proof. That's when I heard the singing again, closer this time. Close enough to make out some of the words. Asterisk. Down in the valley so low. Asterisk, asterisk. Hang your head over. Hear the wind blow. Asterisk, asterisk. Hear the wind blow, dear. Hear the wind blow. Asterisk, asterisk. Hang your head over. Hear the wind blow times. It was an old song, one I remembered from childhood, but these voices were singing it, slow and sad, like a funeral hymn. And they were coming from the direction of the mine. I looked toward the mine entrance, about 100 yards up the slope. It was just a black hole in the hillside now, sealed off with iron bars and warning signs. But between me and the mine, I could see small figures moving through the dead trees. Children, maybe 6 or 7 of them, holding hands in a line. They were too far away to see clearly, but something about the way they moved made my stomach turn. Too slow, too careful, like they were walking on broken glass. I raised my camera and looked through the viewfinder. The children were gone. I lowered the camera and looked again with my naked eyes, still gone. But the singing continued, getting louder and more mournful with each verse. And now I could hear other sounds mixed in with the music, sounds that made no sense. The clank of machinery, men shouting orders, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from underground. Then, cutting through it all, came a sound that made me run back to my camp without looking behind me once. The sound of children screaming. That night, I sat by my fire and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Trespassing kids? Probably. Local children who knew about the old playground and came here to play. The lunch pails and fresh chalk could be explained that way. Kids love abandoned places, and they love secrets even more. The screaming was harder to explain. Maybe they'd gotten scared when they saw me coming. Maybe one of them had gotten hurt on the rusty equipment. I should have followed the sound instead of running away. What kind of ranger was I? But even as I told myself these things, I knew they weren't true. Those children I'd glimpsed through the trees there had been something wrong with them. Something in the way they moved, the way they held themselves. Like they were hurt, like they were in pain. And the song they were singing. I remembered it now. My grandmother used to sing it when she talked about the old days, before the mines came. It was a mourning song, a song for the dead. I looked at the photos I'd taken on my camera, but when I developed them later, they came out strange. Double exposures, like the film had been exposed twice. In every picture of the playground, there were pale, blurry shapes that looked almost like children. But when I looked at the actual playground, I hadn't seen any children at all. Just before I fell asleep, I heard the singing again. Fainter now, like it was coming from very far away. But this time, I could hear my name mixed in with the words. Asterisk Eleanor asterisk, they sang. Asterisk Eleanor, come play with us. Asterisk, I closed my eyes and tried to pretend it was just the wind. The next day, I hiked into town, or what was left of town, to find someone who could tell me about the history of this place. I needed facts, not ghost stories. The old-timers at Garrity's General Store were happy to talk, especially after I bought a few supplies and mentioned I was working for the Park Service. Blackwater Hollow? Old Pete Garrity shook his head. Ain't been nobody up there for near 15 years, not since they sealed the mine. What happened to the mine? I asked. Pete's face went dark. Explosion, 1,943, killed 47 men, and... He paused, looking uncomfortable. And some children who were playing too close to the entrance. Gas leak, they said. Company blamed it on the foreman for not keeping the kids away. My blood went cold. The foreman? Fellow named Ravenshallow. Thomas Ravenshallow. Poor bastard never got over it. Drank himself to death a few years later. The room started spinning. Thomas Ravenshallow. My father. You all right, miss? Pete asked. You look pale as a ghost. I managed to nod. The children who died. Do you remember their names? Pete thought for a moment. There was the Morrison boy, Tommy, I think, and little Sarah Kellum, Billy Hutchins, Mary Catherine Odell. He rattled off more names, and I recognized every one from the lunch pails I'd found. 12 children in all, Pete continued, playing some game near the mine entrance when the gas blew. Company said they'd been warned to stay away. But you know how kids are. The foreman, your daddy, I'm guessing he tried to get them out, but it was too late. Poor man blamed himself till the day he died. I left the store in a daze. My father had never told me about Blackwater Hollow, never mentioned the explosion or the children who died. But now I understood why he'd drunk so much, why he'd sat on the porch every night staring at nothing, why he'd whispered apologies to empty air when he thought no one could hear. He'd been carrying the guilt of those 12 dead children for his entire life. When I got back to the hollow, the playground looked different. The swings were moving faster now, even though there was no wind. The lunch pails were dupe open, their contents scattered on the ground. And the merry-go-round was turning slowly, its rusty bearings squealing a rhythm that sounded like crying. I approached carefully, my camera ready. Through the viewfinder, I could see them clearly now. 12 children, playing on the equipment like it was any normal day. They looked solid, real, except for their clothes. Old-fashioned overalls and dresses from the 1,940 seconds. And their faces were wrong, burned, torn, marked by violence and sudden death. I lowered the camera, and they were gone. Raised it again, and there they were, looking right at me now. One of them, a boy who must have been Tommy Morrison, raised his hand and waved. When he smiled, I could see that half his face was missing. "We've been waiting for you," he said, and his voice was the wind through dead leaves. "Your daddy told us you'd come." I ran like my life depended on it, crashing through the dead trees and stumbling over rocks until I reached my camp. But even there, I wasn't safe. The children's voices followed me, singing their mournful songs, calling my name. And that night, they came to my tent. I woke up to the sound of small hands patting the canvas walls, gentle at first, like children playing a game. Then harder, more insistent. The tent shook with their touch, and I could hear them whispering outside. "Eleanor, Eleanor, come out and play. We want to show you something. Don't be scared. We're not angry anymore." I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. 12 pale faces stared back at me, floating in the darkness like balloons. They looked so young, so hurt, so lost. "What do you want?" I whispered. Tommy Morrison stepped forward. Up close, I could see that his overalls were torn and bloody, his face marked by the explosion that had killed him. But his eyes were kind, like my father's had been before the drinking took him. "We want you to know the truth," he said. "About what really happened. About why we died." "I already know. There was an explosion, a gas leak." Tommy shook his head. "That's what they said. But it's not what happened. We tried to warn them, Eleanor. We tried to tell them about the gas, but the company men wouldn't listen. They said kids didn't know anything about mining." Another child stepped forward, Sarah Kellum, with her hair in pigtails and her dress covered in soot. "We could smell it," she said. "The gas. It made us dizzy, made us sick. We went to tell the grown-ups, but they chased us away." "Your daddy believed us," Billy Hutchins added. His lunch pail was still clutched in his small hands. "He tried to get everyone out, but the company men said he was just trying to avoid work. They made him send the miners back down." The truth hit me like a physical blow. These children hadn't died because they were playing where they shouldn't have been. They died because they were trying to be heroes. They smelled the gas, tried to warn the miners, and been ignored by adults who thought they knew better. And my father had believed them, had tried to save everyone. But the company had overruled him, sent the men back into the mine, and when the explosion came, they'd blamed him for the deaths. "He never stopped feeling guilty," I said. Tommy nodded sadly. "We know. We tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, but he couldn't hear us." "Not like you can." "Why can I hear you?" "Because you came looking for the truth," Mary Catherine Odell said. She was the smallest of them, maybe 6 years old, with her thumb in her mouth and her eyes wide with eternal innocence. "And because you're his daughter, he talked about you all the time down in the mine, said he was going to make sure you never had to go underground like him." The children surrounded me then, their cold hands touching my arms and face. And suddenly, I could see it all. The morning of the explosion. The children smelling gas and running to tell the adults. My father's face when he realized they were right. The company supervisor's angry words about crying wolf and wasting time. The miners reluctantly going back down into the tunnels. And then the explosion. The screaming. The children caught at the entrance, trying one last time to warn the men coming up, the flash of fire that took them all. "We've been waiting here ever since," Tommy said, "waiting for someone to believe us, to tell the real story." "But why me? Why now?" Sarah smiled, and for a moment her burned face looked whole again. "Because it's time. Because the truth needs to come out. And because your daddy's been asking us to take care of you." I looked around at their faces, these 12 children who had died trying to save lives, who had been blamed and forgotten and left to haunt this poisoned hollow for 16 years. My father's guilt finally made sense. He hadn't failed them. The company had failed them. The adults had failed them. But somehow, my father had known the truth, and it had eaten him alive. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Tommy's smile was radiant, despite his wounds. "Help us tell everyone what really happened. Make them understand that we were heroes, not just kids who got in the way." "How?" "The company records," Billy said. "They're still here. Hidden in the mine office. Papers that prove they knew about the gas leak. Prove they ignored our warnings. I looked toward the mine entrance, with its iron bars and warning signs. In there? The children nodded solemnly. It's dangerous, I said. We know, Tommy replied. But we'll protect you, we promise. As the first light of dawn broke over the hollow, the children began to fade. But their voices lingered in the air like smoke. Tonight, they whispered, when the moon is dark, we'll show you the way. I spent that day preparing for what I knew would be the most dangerous thing I'd ever done, but these children had been waiting 16 years for justice. The least I could do was help them find it. Even if it killed me, that night I met the children at the mine entrance. They appeared as the last light faded from the sky, 12 small figures glowing with their own pale light. In the darkness, their wounds were less visible, and they looked almost like normal children heading off to play. Are you ready? Tommy asked. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. I had my flashlight, my camera, and a crowbar I'd bought in town. The iron bars across the mine entrance looked solid, but they were old and rusty. With enough work, I could probably pry one loose. Don't use that, Sarah said, pointing at the crowbar. We have a better way. She walked up to the bars and placed her small hands on the metal. Where she touched, the iron began to glow with soft blue light. The other children joined her, each placing their hands on different bars. The metal grew brighter and brighter until I had to shield my eyes. When the light faded, the bars were gone. Not broken or bent, simply gone, as if they had never existed. How did you? We've had a long time to practice, Billy said. Death teaches you things. The mine entrance yawned before us like a hungry mouth. The smell of gas and decay rolled out of the darkness. My every instinct screamed at me to run, but I thought of my father's face in my dreams, the guilt he'd carried all those years, and I stepped inside. The children surrounded me, their glow providing the only light. We walked down a tunnel that had been carved from living rock, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. Old rail tracks ran down the center of the floor, disappearing into the black depths. Wooden support beams held up the ceiling, but many of them were cracked and sagging. How far? I asked. Not far, Tommy said. The office was right inside, where the foreman could watch. The workers come and go. We walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The tunnel branched off in several directions, but the children led me confidently through the maze. They moved differently here, I noticed. Less like the hurt, confused spirits I'd seen outside, and more like children who knew every inch of their playground. You spent a lot of time down here, I said. Mary Catherine nodded. Our daddies worked here. We'd come visit sometimes, when Mama was busy. Everyone knew us. Everyone was nice to us. Her voice grew sad, until the day we tried to tell them about the gas. We reached a wooden door marked Foreman in faded paint. The children stopped outside, their faces suddenly fearful. We can't go in there, Tommy said. That's where your daddy worked, where he tried so hard to save everyone. I pushed open the door. Inside was a small office with a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust and mold, but I could see papers scattered across the desk. My flashlight beam picked out official letterheads. Blackwater Mining Company. I started reading the papers. Most were routine production reports, safety inspections, payroll records. But near the bottom of the pile, I found what I was looking for. A memo dated 3 days before the explosion. The heading read, "Gas leak, urgent attention required." My father's handwriting filled the page, shaky but determined. Detecting dangerous levels of methane in Tunnel 7. Recommend immediate evacuation and thorough inspection before resuming operations. Several local children have reported strong gas smells and dizziness when playing near entrance. Suggest taking their reports seriously, as children's sense is often more acute than adults. Below my father's signature was another note, this one in different handwriting. Rejected. Production quotas must be met. Workers will resume normal schedule. Raven Shallows excessive. Caution noted for performance review. J. Whitmore, supervisor. I felt tears burning my eyes. Here was the proof. My father had tried to stop the explosion, had believed the children, had put his job on the line to protect everyone. And he'd been overruled by company greed. I photographed every page, my hands steady now, despite the danger. These documents would clear my father's name and prove that the children had died as heroes. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy boots, coming down the tunnel toward us. A flashlight beam swept back and forth, growing brighter as it approached. The children scattered into the shadows, their glow fading to almost nothing. "Someone's coming," I whispered. "Company men," Tommy hissed. "They don't want the truth to come out." The footsteps stopped outside the office. A man's voice called out, rough and angry. "We know you're in there, lady. Come out nice and easy, and maybe we won't have to hurt you." I looked around, desperately. The office had no other exit. I was trapped. "Give us the papers," another voice demanded. "You're trespassing on private property. Those documents are classified." "The mine was abandoned years ago," I called back. "Company still owns the mineral rights and the right to protect its interests." The door handle turned. I grabbed as many papers as I could and stuffed them into my jacket. The children's voices whispered urgently around me. "This way, behind the cabinet. We'll show you." I looked where they pointed and saw that the filing cabinet had been pulled away from the wall, revealing a narrow opening that led deeper into the mine. An escape route my father must have known about. The door burst open just as I squeezed through the gap. Flashlight beams swept the office, and angry voices shouted orders. "She's got the papers! Find her! We can't let this get out!" I crawled through the narrow passage, following the children's fading glow. Behind me, I could hear the men trying to move the cabinet, cursing as they struggled with its weight. The passage opened into another tunnel, this one smaller and older than the main shaft. The children were waiting for me, their faces grim with determination. "They'll chase us," Sarah said. "But we know ways they don't. Why are they so desperate to stop me?" "Because if the truth comes out, people will want to know why the company never paid for what they did," Billy explained. "Why they never helped the families. Why they let your daddy take the blame." We ran through the dark tunnels, the children leading me through passages that seemed to defy logic. Sometimes we climbed up, sometimes down. Sometimes the tunnel was so narrow I had to crawl, other times so wide I couldn't see the walls. Behind us, the men's voices echoed and faded. But they were persistent, and they knew I had to come out somewhere. Finally, we emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by the children's ghostly radiance. The walls were lined with old mining equipment, carts, tools, even a small locomotive. But what caught my attention was the far wall, where someone had painted a mural. It showed the mine as it had been in life. Workers with their lunch pails and helmet lamps, families waiting at the entrance for the shift to end. And in the center, 12 children playing games while their fathers worked below. "We painted this," Mary Catherine said proudly, "after we died, so we'd remember how things used to be." "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Your daddy helped," Tommy added. "His spirit came down here sometimes, after he died. He felt so bad about us. We tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, but guilt is loud. Louder than ghost voices." I heard footsteps in the tunnel behind us. The company men had found our trail. "There's another way out," Sarah said. "But it's dangerous. The ceiling's not stable." "More dangerous than staying here?" The children looked at each other. Tommy stepped forward. "We'll make sure you're safe," he said. "But you have to trust us. Really, trust us." The footsteps were getting closer. I could see flashlight beams dancing on the tunnel walls. "I trust you," I said. The children surrounded me, and suddenly I couldn't see anything but their pale light. I felt myself lifted, carried, protected by their small hands. We moved through rock and earth as if it were water, faster than any human could run. When the light faded, I was standing outside the mine entrance under the stars. The children had brought me home. "The papers," Tommy said urgently. "Do you still have them?" I checked my jacket. Everything was there, the memos, the reports, the proof of what had really happened. "Yes." "Then our work is done," Sarah said. "Now the world will know the truth." The children began to fade, their mission finally complete after 16 years of waiting. "Thank you," I called to them. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for caring about my father." Tommy's voice drifted back like wind through leaves. "Tell them we were brave. Tell them we tried to help." "I will," I promised. "I'll make sure everyone knows." And then they were gone, leaving me alone under the stars with the evidence that would change everything. It took 6 months, but the truth finally came out. The papers I'd found in the mine office were just the beginning. Once the story broke, other documents surfaced. Company memos showing they'd known about safety problems for years. Witness statements from miners who'd been afraid to speak up before. Evidence of a massive cover-up that went all the way to the company's board of directors. The headlines read, "Hero children died trying to prevent mine disaster," and company scapegoated foreman to hide negligence. My father's name was cleared. The families of the dead miners and children received settlements that should have been paid 16 years ago. And I was promoted to senior ranger with a commendation for exceptional dedication to uncovering the truth. But the real reward was simpler than that. I never heard the children's voices again. The playground in Blackwater Hollow fell into natural decay, its paint finally fading, its equipment finally rusting. The lunch pails crumbled away, the stone circles scattered. They were at peace. I still work for the Park Service, but my job has changed. I investigate other old mining sites now, other places where companies buried their mistakes and blamed the workers. I've found that children's spirits aren't uncommon in these places. Kids who died in industrial accidents, whose stories were forgotten or twisted to protect corporate interests. And I can hear them, all of them. The gift the hollow children gave me. Sometimes I wonder if that was their plan all along. Not just to clear my father's name, but to create someone who could speak for all the lost children, all the forgotten workers, all the families who never got justice. I never married my city banker. Turned out he wasn't interested in a woman who talked to ghosts and took on mining companies. That's fine by me. The work I do now is more important than any relationship. Last month, I received a letter from Tommy Morrison's niece. She'd read about the case in the newspapers and wanted to thank me for giving her family closure. She included a photograph, Tommy at age 7, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, holding a fishing pole and a string of perch. He looked exactly like I remembered him, except for one thing. In the photograph, his face was whole. No burn marks, no wounds, just a happy little boy on a summer day. I keep that photograph on my desk as a reminder. The children of Blackwater Hollow aren't hurting anymore. They're at rest, their heroism finally recognized, their deaths finally mourned properly. But there are other children out there. Other voices calling from other forgotten places. Other truths waiting to be uncovered. If you ever find yourself in an old mining town, or near an abandoned factory, or walking through a cemetery where the headstones are too small and too numerous, listen carefully. You might hear them too, the children who tried to warn us, who died protecting others, who wait patiently for someone to tell their stories. They're not angry. They're not vengeful. They just want to be remembered. And if you're very brave and very lucky, you might be able to help them find peace. Just like I did. Just like my father would have wanted. My name is Eleanor Ravenshollow, and I speak for the children who can no longer speak for themselves. Remember their names. Remember their courage. Remember that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths. My name is Marcus Bloodworth, and I've been a park ranger for 22 years. I work the backcountry of Jefferson National Forest in Virginia, where most folks never go. It's quiet work, which suits me fine. I like being alone with the trees and mountains. I'm 45 years old, and I've seen plenty of bad things in my life. I was in Vietnam for 2 years, hunting down soldiers who ran away from their duty. When I came back, my wife left me. She said I was too cold, too distant. Maybe she was right. That's why I took this job in the wilderness. Out here, I don't have to pretend to be normal. It was late October, 1978, when everything started. Hunting season had just begun, and the first snow was falling on Whitetop Mountain. I was patrolling the high country, about 30 miles from the nearest road. Up there, your radio doesn't work, and if something goes wrong, you're on your own. The mountains felt different that week. Wrong, somehow. I'd been walking these trails for over 2 decades, and I knew when something wasn't right. The birds had gone quiet. I hadn't seen a single deer or bear, which was strange for hunting season. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when I found Jimmy Crawford's campsite. Jimmy was a local hunter, been coming up here for 15 years. He knew these woods almost as well as I did, but when I walked into his camp, I knew something terrible had happened. His tent was slashed open from the inside. Long, jagged cuts ran down the orange fabric like claw marks. Jimmy's rifle lay on the ground, unfired. His boots sat by the cold fire pit, laces still tied. But Jimmy was nowhere to be found. I circled the camp, looking for tracks. That's when I saw the footprints in the soft dirt. They started normal, Jimmy's hiking boots walking around the fire. But then they changed. About 10 feet from the tent, the boot prints became something else. Wolf prints, but bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. I followed the trail for maybe 50 yards before I found it. Hanging from a low pine branch was Jimmy's skin. Not his clothes, his actual skin. It hung there like a hunting jacket someone had taken off and forgotten, complete from head to toe, perfectly removed without a single cut or tear. Like a snake had shed its skin. Except snakes don't wear flannel shirts and blue jeans. I stood there, staring at it for a long time, my mind trying to make sense of what I was seeing. 22 years in these woods, 2 years hunting men in Vietnam, and I'd never seen anything like this. The skin swayed gently in the cold mountain breeze. I'm a practical man. I believe in things I can see and touch and understand. So I told myself this had to be some kind of animal attack. Maybe a bear had gotten Jimmy, and scavengers had done the rest. Bears could be crafty. They could drag a body, tear apart a tent. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. No bear could remove a man's skin, so perfectly. No animal could hang it from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground. I took pictures with my department camera and made notes in my book. I bagged what evidence I could find. Then I started following those wolf tracks deeper into the forest. The trail led up toward the old Cherokee hunting grounds, land that had been sacred to the tribe before they were forced to leave in 1838. Most folks didn't know the history, but I'd read about it. The Trail of Tears had passed right through these mountains. Thousands of Cherokee had died on their forced march to Oklahoma. As I climbed higher, the feeling of wrongness got stronger. The trees seemed to lean in closer. The shadows fell in strange directions, and somewhere behind me, I could swear I heard footsteps matching my own pace. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. There always was. In Vietnam, we'd heard stories about ghosts and spirits, but it was always just scared soldiers seeing things that weren't there. This would be the same thing. But when I looked back down the trail, I saw my own boot prints in the mud, and right beside them, wolf prints walking in the exact same direction. The creature had been following me. I made camp that night in a small clearing about 2 miles from Jimmy's site. I built a good fire and kept my rifle close. The temperature dropped fast after sunset, and the wind picked up, making the trees creak and moan like old houses. I was heating up a can of beans when I heard the voice. Help me. It came from the darkness beyond my fire. A man's voice, weak and scared. Help me, please. I grabbed my rifle and clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the black trees, but I couldn't see anyone. Where are you? I called out. Here. By the big oak. I knew that tree. It was about 50 yards north of my camp. A massive old oak that had been growing here since before the Cherokee came. I walked toward it slowly, rifle ready. Keep talking so I can find you, I said. I'm hurt. Something attacked me. Please. The voice was getting closer. My flashlight beam swept back and forth, but I still couldn't see anything, just trees and rocks and fallen leaves. Right here, the voice said, and it was close now, maybe 10 feet away. I'm right here. I spun around, light and rifle pointing in all directions. Nothing. Then I heard it again, but this time the voice was behind me. Help me. I turned back toward my camp, and that's when I saw him. A man standing in the glow of my fire. He was wearing Jimmy Crawford's clothes, the same flannel shirt, the same blue jeans, even the same baseball cap. But it wasn't Jimmy's face. The face was wrong, too long. The eyes were too far apart, and the mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should. Like someone had tried to put on Jimmy's face but couldn't quite make it fit right. Thank you for coming, the thing said in Jimmy's voice. I've been waiting. I raised my rifle. Stay right there. The thing that looked like Jimmy tilted its head. Why are you pointing that at me, Ranger? I'm the victim here. You're not Jimmy Crawford." "Of course I am. Look at me." And for a second, when the firelight hit it just right, it did look exactly like Jimmy. The face snapped into place, all the features aligning perfectly. If I'd blinked, I would have missed the change. "See?" Jimmy's voice said. "It's me. Something attacked me, tore off my skin. But I'm alive. I got away." I kept the rifle pointed at its chest. "Jimmy Crawford has brown eyes. Yours are yellow." The thing smiled, and its teeth were too sharp. "You're very observant, Ranger." "That's good. That's what made you such an excellent hunter in Vietnam." My blood went cold. I'd never told anyone in these mountains about Vietnam. It wasn't in my official file. "How do you know about that?" "I know lots of things about you. Marcus Bloodworth. I know you hunted men in the jungle. I know you were good at it. I know you enjoyed it." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark sky. The thing wearing Jimmy's skin took a step closer. "I know your wife left because she was afraid of you, because she saw what you really were underneath all that civilized pretending. That's enough. A predator, Marcus, just like me." I pulled the trigger. The rifle shot echoed through the mountains like thunder, but when the sound faded, the thing was gone. No blood, no body, just empty air where it had been standing. I searched the area with my flashlight, but found nothing. Not even footprints in the dirt around my fire. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back to a tree, rifle across my knees, waiting for dawn. Every shadow looked like movement. Every sound could have been footsteps. When the sun finally came up, I broke camp and started tracking again. The wolf prints led higher into the Bayou Mountains, toward the old Cherokee sacred sites, places where the medicine men used to perform their ceremonies. About noon, I found the second campsite, 3 hunters this time. The Coleman family from down in the valley, Bob, his teenage son Mike, and Bob's brother Ray. I knew them all. Good people who'd been coming up here every October for the past 10 years. Their camp looked like a tornado had hit it. Tents shredded, gear scattered everywhere, but no bodies. What I found instead made my hands shake. 3 skins hanging from 3 different trees, perfectly preserved, still wearing the clothes they'd died in. Bob's work shirt and hunting vest, Mike's college sweatshirt, Ray's orange safety jacket. And beneath each tree, the tracks changed from human to wolf. I was staring at Ray's skin when I heard the radio crackle. My handheld was clipped to my belt, and it shouldn't have worked this far from any towers. But a voice came through clear as day. "Marcus, this is Sarah. Do you copy?" Sarah Whitehorse was my backup, another ranger who sometimes worked this sector. But she was supposed to be on vacation this week. "Sarah, what are you doing on duty?" "Looking for you, Marcus. Your wife called headquarters. She's worried about you." I almost dropped the radio. "My wife's been dead for 3 years, Sarah." Static filled the channel for a long moment. Then Sarah's voice came back, but it sounded different. Colder. "Is she, Marcus? Are you sure about that?" The radio went dead. I looked up at the 3 skins swaying in the wind, and I finally understood what I was dealing with. This thing could take anyone's shape, anyone's voice. It could become them so perfectly that even I couldn't tell the difference. And it was hunting me. I followed the trail deeper into Cherokee territory. The wolf tracks led to a narrow valley I'd never seen before, hidden between 2 ridgelines. Ancient symbols were carved into trees, Cherokee writing that looked fresh, like someone had just cut them into the bark. The air felt thick and wrong, like trying to breathe underwater. My compass spun in circles. The temperature kept changing from freezing cold to summer hot and back again. That's when I found the cave. It was set into the side of the mountain, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. The wolf tracks led straight to it and disappeared inside. I clicked on my flashlight and followed them in. The cave was bigger than it looked from outside, much bigger. The tunnel stretched back into the mountain farther than my light could reach. Along the walls, painted in what looked like dried blood, were Cherokee symbols and pictures of the ritual the thing had described. Pictures of men wearing other men's skins. The deeper I went, the more skins I found. Dozens of them, hanging from iron hooks driven into the rock walls. Some looked fresh, others were old and dried, crumbling with age. A few still had name tags or wallet chains attached. At the back of the cave, I found the altar. It was a flat stone table covered in Cherokee ritual tools, obsidian knives, bone needles, clay bowls stained with blood. And lying on top of it, spread out like a doctor's diagram, was a complete human skin that looked exactly like me. My own face stared up at me from that stone table. My own arms and legs and body, perfectly preserved. Even the scar on my left hand from a training accident in Vietnam. "Do you like it?" I spun around. Sarah Whitehorse stood at the cave entrance, but her eyes were the same yellow as the fake Jimmy's had been. "It took me 3 days to prepare it," she said in Sarah's voice. "I had to watch you very carefully to get all the details right. You're not Sarah." "No, but I will be soon. Just like I'll be you." The thing wearing Sarah's skin walked closer. "I've been preparing for this hunt for a very long time, Marcus." "What are you?" "I was Cherokee medicine man. My name was Standing Bear. When the soldiers came to force my people from our sacred lands, I chose to become something that could hunt them back." The fake Sarah's face began to change. The features shifted and flowed like melting wax. The skin darkened, the hair grew longer and blacker. In seconds, an old Cherokee man stood before me instead of the young ranger. I learned the old ways, the dark ways, how to wear the skins of my enemies and walk among them unseen. His voice was ancient and full of hatred. "For 140 years, I have taken the forms of those who trespass on sacred ground. The Coleman family, Jimmy Crawford, how many others? Hundreds. I collect their skins, their voices, their memories. They become part of me." Standing Bear smiled, showing teeth filed to sharp points. "Your military training will be particularly useful. A ranger who can track and kill. The perfect predator." He gestured to the altar. "Put on your skin, Marcus. Join me willingly, and I'll make it quick." I raised my rifle. "I don't think so." He laughed. "Modern weapons cannot harm me. I am beyond such things now." I pulled the trigger anyway. The bullet hit him center mass and passed right through, striking the cave wall behind him. He didn't even flinch. "Now you understand," Standing Bear said. "You cannot fight what you cannot touch." But he was wrong about one thing. When the bullet hit the cave wall, it knocked loose one of the Cherokee ritual knives from a shelf. The obsidian blade clattered to the floor at my feet. I snatched it up just as Standing Bear lunged forward. The blade sliced across his arm, and for the first time, he screamed. Black blood poured from the wound. "Traditional weapons?" I said. "That's your weakness." Standing Bear's face twisted with rage. "Clever, but not clever enough." He began to change again. His human form melted away, replaced by something that was part wolf, part man, and part something else entirely. 7 feet tall, covered in matted black fur, with claws as long as my fingers. I ran. The creature howled behind me as I raced through the cave tunnels. I could hear its claws scraping against the stone walls as it chased me. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran, showing glimpses of more hanging skins, more ritual symbols, more evidence of Standing Bear's century-long killing spree. I burst out of the cave into daylight and kept running. Behind me, the howling grew louder and more furious. Trees crashed and splintered as the creature tore through the forest in pursuit. I had the obsidian knife, but I needed more weapons. Traditional Cherokee weapons. And I needed to find a way to kill something that had been hunting for 140 years. Most of all, I needed to find Sarah Whitehorse before Standing Bear added her skin to his collection. That's when I heard her screaming. The sound came from deeper in the valley, beyond a stand of old-growth pines. I ran toward it, crashing through underbrush and fallen logs. The screaming stopped and started again, getting weaker each time. I found her tied to a tree in a small clearing. The real Sarah, alive but barely conscious. Her face was pale, and there were cuts on her arms and legs, places where Standing Bear had started to remove her skin. "Marcus," she whispered when she saw me. "Thank God. I thought you were him." I cut her ropes with the obsidian knife. "How long has he had you?" 3 days. Maybe 4. He's been practicing. Learning how to sound like me. Learning my memories." She shuddered. "He knows everything about me now. My childhood, my training, even my dreams. Can you walk?" She nodded and tried to stand. That's when Standing Bear stepped out from behind the trees. But this time, He was wearing my skin. The thing that looked exactly like me smiled with my own face. "Hello, Sarah." "Hello, Marcus." It was perfect. Every detail from my height to my voice to the way I walked. Even Sarah stared in confusion, looking back and forth between me and my double. "Which one of us is real, Sarah?" the fake Marcus asked. "Can you tell?" I still held the obsidian knife, but Standing Bear in my form had somehow gotten my rifle. He pointed it at Sarah. "Put down the knife, Marcus, or I kill her." "Don't listen to him," I told Sarah. "He needs us alive to complete the skin-wearing ritual." "Actually," the fake me said, "I only need your skins. You can be dead when I take them." He was right. I'd seen the evidence in the cave. Some of those skins had been cut from corpses. "Why me?" I asked. "Why hunt me specifically?" "Because you're already a predator. In Vietnam, you hunted men for sport. You enjoyed the kill." Standing Bear's words came out of my own mouth. I can use that. A park ranger who kills won't be questioned, won't be stopped. I hunted soldiers who abandoned their duty. That's different. Is it? You felt the same satisfaction when you pulled the trigger. The same rush of power. The fake Marcus grinned. "I know, because I've been wearing your memories for the past hour." That's when I realized the truth. The skin on the altar hadn't been a copy. It had been my actual skin, taken while I slept. Standing Bear had been wearing my identity since I woke up this morning, which meant I wasn't Marcus Bloodworth anymore. I was something else. "You're starting to understand," Standing Bear said. "You died last night, Marcus. What you are now is something between life and death. A spirit bound to flesh that's no longer yours." I looked down at my hands. They looked normal, felt normal, but when I concentrated, I could see through them to the ground below. "The obsidian knife?" Sarah whispered. "Look at the obsidian knife." The blade was glowing with a faint blue light. Cherokee magic, responding to my magif, spiritual state. "Traditional weapons work on spirits," I said, understanding finally. "That's why it can hurt you. That's why you're afraid of it." Standing Bear, wearing my stolen skin, raised the rifle. "Give me the knife, spirit. Your time in this world is over." Instead, I threw it to Sarah. She caught the blade and spun toward Standing Bear in one smooth motion. The obsidian point sank deep into his chest, right where a human heart would be. Standing Bear screamed and stumbled backward. My stolen skin began to smoke and peel away from his real form underneath. The rifle fell from his hands as he clawed at the wound. "The altar," I shouted to Sarah. "Get to the cave and destroy the altar." But Standing Bear wasn't finished. Even with the knife in his chest, he began to change. My skin split open, and the wolf thing emerged, bigger and more terrible than before. The obsidian blade fell out as his body transformed. Sarah grabbed the knife and ran toward the cave. I picked up my rifle and followed, but the bullets still passed through the creature without effect. Only traditional weapons could harm him now. We reached the cave with Standing Bear howling right behind us. Inside, Sarah ran to the stone altar while I tried to hold off the creature with the obsidian knife. "Destroy the skins," I yelled. "Burn them all." Sarah grabbed a ritual torch from the wall and set fire to the hanging skins. The cave filled with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. Each skin that burned weakened Standing Bear a little more, but he was still fighting. His claws raked across my chest, and even though I was already dead, the pain was real. He knocked me down and lunged for Sarah. She spun around and drove the obsidian knife up into his throat. Standing Bear froze. His yellow eyes went wide with shock. Black blood poured from the wound and sizzled where it hit the stone floor. "Impossible," he gasped. "I am eternal. I am vengeance for my people." "You're not vengeance," Sarah said. "You're just another predator." She twisted the knife deeper. Standing Bear's wolf form began to dissolve, showing glimpses of the old Cherokee medicine man underneath. He was ancient and withered, his face marked by 140 years of hatred and killing. "My people," he whispered. "My sacred lands. Your people would be ashamed of what you became," I said. Standing Bear looked at me with his dying eyes. For just a moment, I saw not the monster, but the man he'd been before the Trail of Tears broke his spirit and turned him into a killer. "I was protector," he said. "I was supposed to protect them." Then he crumbled to dust. The cave began to shake. Rocks fell from the ceiling as the Cherokee magic that had held this place together for 140 years finally broke apart. Sarah and I ran for the entrance as the tunnel collapsed behind us. We made it outside just as the entire mountainside came down, burying, standing, Bear's cave and all his collected skins forever. In my official report, I wrote that Jimmy Crawford and the Coleman family had been killed by a serial killer who was now deceased. I described finding the suspect's body in a cave-in and how the case was closed. Nobody questioned it. 3 missing hunters, 1 dead killer, problem solved. That's how these things usually work in the real world. But Sarah and I knew the truth. I was still dead, technically speaking. The ritual that Standing Bear had used created something between a ghost and a living person. I could touch things, talk to people, even eat food. But I cast no reflection in mirrors. And sometimes, when I wasn't concentrating, people looked right through me. Sarah kept my secret. She also kept the obsidian knife. In case there are others like him, she said. She was right to worry. Over the next few months, I started hearing stories from other rangers. Disappearances in national parks across the country. Missing hikers and campers. Sometimes they found empty tents cut open from the inside. The Cherokee weren't the only tribe that knew transformation magic. Other medicine men had made the same choice Standing Bear had during their people's darkest hours. Rather than die with honor, they had chosen to become monsters. My new condition made me useful for tracking them. Traditional spirits could sense each other, and Cherokee magic had given me abilities I'd never had as a living man. I could track supernatural creatures the way I'd once tracked deserters in Vietnam. The Park Service created a special unit for unexplained disappearances. Officially, it was just a task force for serial killers who operated in wilderness areas. Unofficially, Sarah and I hunted things that shouldn't exist. We saved people when we could, we stopped predators when we had to, and we learned that the world had a lot more monsters in it than most folks realized. Sometimes, late at night in my ranger station, I wondered if I'd become a monster too. I was dead but still walking around. I hunted creatures that had once been human. The line between protector and predator was thinner than I'd ever imagined. But then I'd remember Standing Bear's final words. He'd been a protector once, before hatred and revenge twisted him into something evil. The difference between him and me wasn't what we'd become. It was what we chose to do with the power we'd been given. I chose to protect people, even if it meant spending eternity hunting monsters in America's last wild places. Sarah retired from the Park Service 5 years later and moved back to town. She said being around me reminded her too much of that day in the cave. I understood. Some experiences change you so much that you can never go back to who you were before. But she still calls me sometimes when there are reports of strange disappearances, and she still has that obsidian knife, just in case. As for me, I'm 15. Still patrolling the backcountry of Jefferson National Forest. Still walking trails where most folks never go. Still listening for sounds that don't belong and watching for tracks that shouldn't exist. The mountains feel peaceful now. The birds sing again, and the deer have returned to their old paths. But I know that peace is fragile. There are always new predators moving through the wilderness. Always new monsters wearing human faces, and there's always someone who needs to hunt them. My name is Marcus Bloodworth, and I've been dead for over 40 years. But I'm still a park ranger, and I still protect these mountains and the people who visit them. Some jobs, it turns out, don't end just because you die. The only difference is that now, when something evil is stalking innocent people in the deep woods, it has to worry about me stalking it back. And unlike Standing Bear, I remember what I'm really protecting. Not just the land, but the idea that some places should stay safe. That some people still stand between the monsters and everyone else, even if those people aren't entirely human anymore. My name is Catherine Ironmoon, and I've been a forest ranger for 11 years. I work the high peaks of Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, where the air gets thin and the weather can kill you in minutes. People think being a ranger is all campfire talks and picking up trash, but up here at 6,000 feet, I'm more like a mountain rescue specialist. When climbers get lost or hurt, I'm the one who goes to get them. 3 years ago, I lost my climbing partner, Jake, somewhere in these mountains. One day he was there, the next day he just wasn't. We searched for weeks, but never found so much as a boot print. That's when I started paying real attention to how many people disappear up here. More than you'd think, more than makes sense. The other rangers say, I've gotten weird about it. Maybe they're right. I keep files on every missing person case, every strange incident. I stay in better shape than I need to. I read everything I can about survival in extreme conditions. And yeah, I have bad dreams sometimes. Dreams about being so hungry you'd do anything to make it stop. But I'm a professional. I don't believe in monsters or spirits or any of that folklore nonsense. When people die in the mountains, it's because of cold or falls or getting lost. Simple as that. It's December 23rd, 1984, and I'm headed up to Black Balsam Knob because 3 college kids from Duke haven't checked in. They were supposed to be back 2 days ago. The weather's been brutal, temperatures dropping to 20 below, winds hitting 60 miles per hour, snow coming down so hard you can't see your own boots. My radio crackles as I strap on my snowshoes. Catherine, you sure about this? It's dispatch. Weather service says this storm's gonna get worse before it gets better. I'm sure, I say. If those kids are still alive, they won't be for long. I've got everything I need, military-grade cold weather gear, enough food for 5 days, medical supplies, ice climbing equipment. My emergency beacon is clipped to my jacket. I've done this hundreds of times. The trail up to Black Balsam starts easy, but within an hour I'm breaking trail through knee-deep snow. The wind hits like a fist, and even with my goggles, I can barely see 10 feet ahead. This is exactly the kind of weather that kills people. College kids probably had no idea what they were getting into. Cherokee legends say this area is special. Sacred, some say. Dangerous, say others. The old-timers talk about something called Kekle Kudle, some kind of spirit that walks when people get desperate. But that's northern stuff, Algonquian tribes. The Cherokee down here had different stories, darker ones about winter and hunger and what people do when they're dying. I don't put much stock in legends, but I know the history. In the 1800s, a whole Cherokee band disappeared during a bad winter somewhere around here. Just gone. Some folks said they moved on, but others whispered they got snowed in and, well, when you're starving, people make terrible choices. The snow's getting deeper, and I'm burning more energy than I planned. That's when I smell it. Smoke. Somebody's got a fire going up ahead. Could be the college kids. I push harder, following the scent through the trees. The smoke smell gets stronger, but there's something else mixed in. Something that makes my stomach turn. Burning meat. But not like venison or rabbit. Something different. I find their camp in a clearing about a quarter mile from the main trail. At first, I think I'm looking at 3 people sitting around a fire, and I'm relieved. Then I get closer. They're dead. All 3 of them. But they're arranged in a perfect circle around the fire pit, sitting upright like they died having a conversation. Their expedition gear is scattered around, high-quality stuff that should have kept them alive. But what makes me stop cold is what I see when I look closer. They've been eating themselves. Not just fingers or toes. You sometimes see that with severe frostbite. These kids have bite marks up their arms, chunks missing from their thighs. Human bite marks, their own teeth marks. And the expressions on their faces, they look satisfied. Content, like they died happy. I've seen a lot of death in these mountains, but nothing like this. I key my radio, nothing but static. The storm's blocking everything. That's when I hear it for the first time. Over the wind, just barely audible, chewing. I spin around, hand going to the bear spray on my belt, but there's nothing there. Just snow and trees and that awful sound carrying on the wind. Chewing, like someone eating an apple, except wetter. I force myself to focus. These kids need documentation. Evidence. Whatever happened here, their families deserve answers. I start with the basics, pulling out my camera and notebook. The fire pit is made from local stones, arranged in a traditional Cherokee pattern. That's weird. College kids wouldn't know how to build a fire like this. The flames are still burning, which means someone's been feeding it recently. The first body is a girl, maybe 20 years old. Brown hair, expensive hiking boots. Her down jacket is ripped open, and I can see bite marks on her ribs. Human teeth marks, but some of them look wrong, too big. Too sharp. Like human teeth, but more of them. Her backpack has protein bars, freeze-dried meals, enough food for a week. None of it touched. But there's blood on her mouth, and when I look closer, there's flesh stuck between her teeth. Her own flesh. The chewing sound comes again, closer this time. Definitely not the wind. I document the other two bodies. Both male, both showing the same pattern. Self-cannibalism, starting with the extremities and working inward. But they all died with these peaceful expressions, like they'd just had the best meal of their lives. That's impossible. People who resort to cannibalism do it because they're desperate, starving. They don't look happy about it. I check their gear again. No equipment failures. Their tent is high quality, properly set up, sleeping bags rated for 40 below. Enough food to last 2 weeks. No reason for them to starve. But something made them eat themselves. I'm starting to feel hungry, which is strange because I ate an energy bar an hour ago. Mountain work burns calories, but this feels different. Deeper. Like I haven't eaten in days. The wind shifts, and I smell something that makes my mouth water despite myself. Cooking meat. Good meat. I follow the scent and find a small camping stove 20 feet from the fire. There's a pot on it, still warm. Inside is a stew that smells incredible. Better than anything I've ever smelled. My stomach clenches with hunger so sharp it's painful. I haven't felt this hungry since. Actually, I can't remember ever feeling this hungry. I reach for the spoon before I catch myself. This is evidence. I need to document it, not eat it. But God, it smells good. I force myself to step back and take photos. The stew looks normal. Chunks of meat, some vegetables, could be anything. Venison maybe, or rabbit. Hard to tell from the pieces. The chewing sound comes again, and this time I see where it's coming from. There's something moving in the trees, about 50 yards away. Tall. Maybe 8 feet tall. It's hard to see clearly through the snow, but it looks like a person. A very thin person. Hello? I call out. Are you injured? Do you need help? The chewing stops. The figure turns toward me, and even through the blowing snow, I can see it's holding something in its hands, something it was eating, something that looks like a human arm. It starts walking toward me. I fumble for my radio, still nothing but static. My emergency beacon is working, the light's blinking, but that just sends a signal. Doesn't let me talk to anyone. The figure gets closer, and I can see it better now. It is human, sort of. Male, probably. But so thin he's almost skeletal. His face is gaunt, cheeks sunken, but his belly is round and full, like he's been eating well. He's naked except for scraps of clothing hanging off his frame. His skin is pale, almost gray, but his mouth is red, very red. Catherine, he says, and my blood freezes. He knows my name. His voice is familiar, but wrong somehow, like someone doing a bad impression of someone I know. Catherine Iron Moon, he says again, and takes another step closer. I've been waiting for you. That's when I see his face clearly. It's Jake, my missing climbing partner, but wrong. So wrong. His eyes are black, completely black, and when he smiles, I see he has too many teeth. Sharp teeth, like a shark's. Jake? My voice comes out as a whisper. I've learned so much since I've been gone, he says, holding up the arm he was eating. I can see bite marks on it that match his mouth. About hunger. About satisfaction, about what we really need to survive. He takes another bite, and the sound of his teeth crushing bone echoes off the trees. You're hungry too, aren't you, Catherine? I can smell it on you. The hunger is calling you, just like it called me. And he's right, I am hungry. Hungrier than I've ever been. The smell from that pot is driving me crazy, and looking at what Jake's eating, my mouth starts watering. What the hell is wrong with me? The kids were so grateful when I showed them how to feed properly. Jake continues, moving closer. They fought it at first, but once they tasted their own flesh, once they understood the satisfaction, they couldn't stop. None of us can stop. I back toward my pack, toward my gear. Whatever Jake has become, he's not my partner anymore. You don't have to fight it, he says. The hunger is natural. It's what we're supposed to feel. What we're supposed to do. Just take one. Bite, Catherine. One bite, and you'll understand everything. The smell from the pot is overwhelming now. I'm so hungry, I'm dizzy. So hungry it hurts. And despite everything I'm seeing, everything I know is wrong, I find myself walking toward it. I stop myself just as my hand reaches for the spoon. What am I doing? This isn't normal hunger. This is something else. Something wrong. That's it, Jake says, his voice like honey. Just one taste. It's the best thing you'll ever experience. Better than any food you've ever had. Better than any feeling you've ever had. I force myself to turn away from the pot and face him. Up close, he's even worse. His skin is stretched tight over his bones, but his stomach bulges obscenely. His fingers are too long, ending in what look like claws, and those teeth. What happened to you? I ask. I found the truth, he says, about what we really are. What we're meant to be. Humans think they're so civilized, but deep down, we're all just hungry animals. The Cherokee understood this. They knew what to do when the hunger came. He gestures toward the dead college kids. They tried to resist at first, told themselves they weren't that desperate. But the hunger grows, Catherine. It gets stronger and stronger until it's all you can think about, until it's all you are. This isn't hunger, I say. This is sickness. This is evolution, Jake interrupts. The weak die, the strong feed, and the strong become something more. That's when I hear voices. Human voices, coming from the direction of the trail. Rescue team, probably. They got my beacon signal and came looking. No, I whisper. If they find this place, if they're exposed to whatever's causing this hunger. More friends, Jake says, and his smile widens. Good. I'm still hungry. I grab my radio and try again. This time, I get through. This is Ranger Ironmoon, I say. Do not approach Black Balsam. Repeat. Do not approach. There's been an incident. Hazardous conditions. Static, then a voice. Catherine? This is Dave Crowfeather. We got your beacon. What's your status? Dave? He's another ranger, works the eastern sector. Good man. I can't let him come up here. Dave, stay back. There's something wrong here. Something dangerous. What kind of dangerous? We've got medical supplies, extraction gear. Not that kind of dangerous, I say, watching Jake circle around toward the voices. Just trust me. Stay away. But the radio goes dead again, and I hear Dave's voice echoing through the trees. He's close. Maybe 5 minutes away. Jake looks at me and licks his lips. I'll take good care of him, he says. Just like I took care of you. What do you mean? You've been coming here for 3 years, Catherine. Walking these trails, breathing this air, getting closer and closer to understanding. The hunger's been growing in you all this time. You just haven't given in yet. He's right, and that terrifies me. I have been hungrier lately. Eating more but never feeling satisfied, having dreams about things I don't want to remember. It started the day I disappeared, Jake continues. The day I found the old Cherokee site. The place where they made their choice during the starvation winter. Some hungers are older than civilization, Catherine. Some hungers never die. I think about the Cherokee legends. The stories about Kekle Kudle, the hunger that walks. But those were northern stories, weren't they? Algonquian tribes, not Cherokee. The Cherokee had different names for it, Jake says, like he's reading my mind. But the hunger is the same. When people get desperate enough, when they cross certain lines, they become something new, something that spreads the hunger to others. Dave's voice is getting closer. I can hear at least 2 other people with him, maybe 3. I have to warn them, I say. You can, try, Jake says. But you're fighting your own nature now. How long can you resist? How long before you give in to what you really want? And God help me, I know what I really want. I want to taste that stew. I want to know what those college kids felt when they were eating themselves. I want to understand why they looked so satisfied. I start running toward Dave's voice, but the hunger hits me like a physical blow. I stumble, fall to my knees in the snow. My stomach feels like it's eating itself. I'm dizzy, weak, desperate. Behind me, Jake laughs. It's starting, he says. The real hunger. The hunger that never stops. I force myself to get up, to keep moving. Dave is about 2 minutes away now. I can hear him talking to his team, coordinating their approach. That's when I smell it again. The cooking meat. But this time, it's not coming from the camp. It's coming from ahead of me, from where Dave is. I break through a stand of pine trees and find them. Dave and two other rangers, setting up an emergency shelter. They've got a camp stove going, and something's cooking in a pot, something that smells exactly like what Jake was making. Catherine, Dave waves me over. Thank God you're okay. We were worried when we lost radio contact. Dave, I say carefully, what are you cooking? He looks confused. Cooking? We just got here. Haven't had time to cook anything. But the pot is right there, steaming, and the smell is making my mouth water so badly I have to swallow to keep from drooling. You don't see it? I ask. Now all three of them are looking at me like I'm crazy. See what? Dave asks. That's when I understand. The hunger isn't just physical. It changes how you see things. It makes you see food where there isn't any. It makes you want things you shouldn't want. And if I'm seeing the pot, that means the hunger is already in me. We need to leave, I say. Right now, all of us. Catherine, you're not making sense, Dave says. We're here to help, to get those college kids. The college kids are dead, I tell him. And if we don't leave now, we will be too. That's when Jake steps out of the trees behind them. Hello, Dave, Jake says in that honey-sweet voice. It's been a long time. Dave spins around, and his face goes white. He knows Jake was supposed to be dead. They all do. Jesus Christ, one of the other rangers whispers. What happened to him? Jake is even worse now than he was 10 minutes ago. His stomach has grown larger, more distended, and there's fresh blood around his mouth. I don't want to think about where he got it. I found the answer, Jake tells them. The answer to the question we all ask up here, in the mountains. What do you do when civilization fails? When all your gear and training and rules don't matter anymore? When you're dying and there's only one way to survive? Jake, Dave says slowly, you need medical attention. We can get you to a hospital, get you help. Jake laughs, and the sound echoes off the mountains like breaking glass. I don't need help. I need food. And you're going to give it to me. That's when the other rangers start to smell it too. I can see it in their faces. Confusion, then hunger, then that desperate, overwhelming need. The same thing I've been fighting. Do you smell that? One of them asks. What is that? It smells incredible. They're looking around for the source, but there's nothing there. Nothing but Jake and his awful smile. It's the smell of satisfaction, he tells them, of finally understanding what you really need, what you've always needed. I try to key my radio, but my hands are shaking too badly. The hunger is getting stronger, and I can feel my rational mind slipping away. All I can think about is food. All I can think about is how good it would feel to just give in. Catherine, Dave says, and his voice sounds strange, distant. Are you feeling this too? This? Hunger? I nod, not trusting myself to speak. It's normal, Jake says. Hunger is the most honest emotion we have. Everything else is just pretending. Just civilization lying to us about what we really are. One of the rangers, I think his name is Tom, starts walking toward Jake. His eyes are glazed, unfocused. Tom, no, I try to say, but my voice comes out as a whisper. I'm so hungry, Tom says. I feel like I haven't eaten in weeks. I know, Jake says gently. I can help with that. I can show you how to feel satisfied. Really satisfied. Forever. Tom is almost within reach now. Jake extends one of those impossibly long arms toward him. And that's when I remember something. Something the Cherokee elder told me years ago when I first started working these mountains. About fasting, about spiritual discipline, about how some hungers can only be defeated by refusing to feed them at all. The Cherokee didn't create this thing. They fought it. It's not hunger, I say, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's infection. It's something that makes you think you're hungry, so you'll do what it wants. Jake's head snaps toward me, and for the first time, he looks angry. Shut up, he says, and his voice isn't honey anymore. It's like gravel and broken glass. You don't understand. You can't understand until you taste it. But I'm remembering more now. The Cherokee stories about the starvation winter, about the shaman who chose cannibalism to keep his people alive, about how that choice changed him into something else, something that spread the hunger to everyone it touched. You were the shaman, I say to Jake. In the original story, you were the one who made the choice. His face changes, becoming older somehow. Ancient. I saved my people, he says. When the snow wouldn't stop and the game was gone and children were dying, I made the hard choice. I did what had to be done. You damned them, I say. You turned them all into monsters. I gave them life. But Dave and the other rangers are listening now, fighting through the hunger haze. They're starting to understand. The beacon, Dave says suddenly. Your emergency beacon. It's not just sending location data. It's been broadcasting something else. Some kind of signal. I look down at the device, clipped to my jacket. The light isn't just blinking, it's pulsing in a pattern, like a heartbeat. Shut it off, I tell him. But when I try to unclip it, I can't. My fingers won't work. The hunger is too strong now, making me weak and confused. Jake starts moving toward us, and with each step, the hunger gets worse. Tom is completely under now, walking toward Jake with his arms outstretched like he's sleepwalking. The only way to stop it, I say, fighting to think clearly, is to stop feeding it completely. No food, no matter how hungry you get, no matter how much it hurts. You'll die, Jake says. Humans can't survive without food. Maybe, I say, but at least we'll die human. I throw my pack away from me. All my food, all my emergency rations. Dave sees what I'm doing and does the same. The third ranger, I never did catch his name, follows suit. But Tom is gone. Jake reaches out and touches his forehead, and Tom's eyes go completely black. When he smiles, his teeth are sharp. Too late for him, Jake says. But not for you. Not yet. Just one bite, Catherine. One taste, and the pain stops. The hunger stops. Everything stops except the satisfaction. The smell from the imaginary pot is overwhelming now. I'm so hungry I can barely stand. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to eat something, anything. But I remember the Cherokee stories, the fasting rituals, the idea that some spiritual battles can only be won through discipline and sacrifice. I close my eyes and start to fast. Really fast. Not just skip a meal, but commit to eating nothing until this is over. Until the hunger entity is defeated or I'm dead. The pain is immediate and terrible. But for the first time since I found the camp, my mind starts to clear. No, Jake says, and his voice is panicked now. You don't understand what you're doing. You'll die. You'll starve. Maybe, I say again, but I won't become you. Dave understands. I can see it in his eyes. He's fighting the hunger too, using the fasting as a weapon against it. Jake screams then, a sound like wind through broken trees. Tom screams too, clutching his head like something's trying to claw its way out. And for the first time in 3 years, I feel like maybe, just maybe, I can win. The screaming goes on for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. Jake and Tom writhing in the snow, clutching their heads, making sounds that no human throat should be able to make. Then, suddenly, silence. Jake looks up at me, and for a moment, his eyes are normal again. Human, confused. Catherine, he says, and it's really his voice this time. What's happening? Where am I? But then his eyes go black again, and he starts laughing. You think you've won? He says. You think starving yourself will stop what's already started? The hunger is in you now, Catherine. In all of you. It will never leave. He's right about one thing. I can feel it in me. A gnawing emptiness that has nothing to do with food. A craving for something I can't name and don't want to understand. But the fasting is working. Each hour I go without eating, the entity's hold gets weaker. My mind gets clearer. I can think past the hunger to the real problem. The beacon, I say to Dave, it's not just broadcasting location. It's amplifying the signal, making the hunger stronger. Dave nods and reaches for his knife. But when he tries to cut the beacon off my jacket, his hand stops inches away. I can't, he says. Something won't let me. That's when I understand. The beacon isn't just amplifying the signal, it's the source. Somehow, when I activated it, I opened a connection to something that should have stayed buried. I think about the Cherokee stories again. About spiritual discipline and sacrifice. About how some problems can only be solved by giving up what you think you need. I unclip the beacon myself, fighting against every instinct that tells me I need it to survive. Without it, no one will know where we are. Without it, we might die on this mountain, but with it, we'll become monsters. I throw it as hard as I can into the trees. The effect is immediate. Jake collapses like someone cut his strings. Tom blinks, and his eyes are normal again. "What happened?" Tom asks. "Why do I taste blood?" I don't tell him. The hunger is still there, will always be there, I think, but it's manageable now, like background noise instead of a scream. We gather up the bodies of the college kids, document what we can. Officially, it goes down as equipment failure and exposure. The medical examiner finds evidence of extreme hypothermia and attributes the bite marks to scavenging animals. I know better, but I also know no one would believe the truth. Jake disappears again that night. Just vanishes from the rescue camp like he was never there. Tom doesn't remember anything after reaching our location. Dave and the third ranger, his name was Paul, remember feeling hungry, but that's all. I remember everything. I go back to work the next week. Business as usual. But I keep an eye on the missing persons reports. I study Cherokee spiritual practices in my spare time. I learn about fasting and discipline and how to fight hungers that aren't really hunger, because the thing is still out there, waiting, looking for the next person desperate enough, hungry enough to make the wrong choice. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is right, I can hear it calling my name. I don't answer, but I listen, because someone has to. Someone has to know what's really out there in the mountains. Someone has to be ready when the hunger starts walking again. My name is Catherine Ironmoon, and I've been a forest ranger for 11 years. And I've learned that some jobs never really end. The mountains remember everything, every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of weakness when civilization fails and people become something else. They remember and they wait, and so do I. My name is Jonathan Silverwolf, and I've been a ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest for 6 years now. People always ask about my last name. Yeah, it's real, and yeah, I know how it sounds given what I'm about to tell you. My Cherokee grandmother gave it to our family, said it meant we had a connection to the wild things. I used to think that was just old stories. I should have listened to her. It was early November 1991 when everything started. I was stationed at Red River Gorge, way out in the canyon country where the sandstone cliffs rise up like ancient walls and the hollows run so deep you can't see the bottom from the rim. Beautiful country, but lonely. The nearest town was 25 miles of winding mountain roads away. I'd been tracking a pack of what I thought were coyotes for about 3 months. Livestock had been getting killed in ways that didn't make sense. Too organized, too smart. The bite patterns were weird too, but I figured it was just a big pack, working together. Happens sometimes when prey gets scarce. My fiancée Sarah, she's a vet down in town, kept telling me to be careful. "John," she'd say, "something feels wrong about those killings. The wounds I've seen, they don't look right." But I was 29 years old with a zoology degree and 6 years of tracking experience. I thought I knew better. The morning it all went bad started like any other, cold fog hanging in the gorges. That wet dog smell that always seemed to hang around the area lately. I was checking my camera traps when the radio crackled. "John, you need to get over to Chimney Top Campground. Now." It was Bill, my supervisor. His voice had that tight sound it gets when something's really wrong. "What's the situation?" "Just get over here. Bring your medical kit." The drive took 20 minutes on the old fire roads. When I got there, I saw 3 state police cars and an ambulance. Bill met me at the tree line, his face gray. "Family of 4, he said quietly. "The Hendersons, from Louisville. They were camping here last night." "Animal attack?" "That's what we're calling it." He handed me latex gloves. "But John, I've never seen anything like this." The campsite looked like a tornado had hit it. The tent was shredded, camping gear scattered everywhere. But it wasn't random destruction. Everything was arranged in a circle around where the tent had been. Coolers stacked neat as you please, sleeping bags folded, camp chairs set up facing inward, and in the center of that circle, 4 sleeping bags lined up side by side. I don't want to describe what was in those bags. I'll just say that Bill was right. I'd never seen anything like it either. The bite marks were all wrong, too organized. Some looked like they came from something walking on two legs, biting down from above. Pack attack, I told the state police detective. Probably 5 or 6 animals. They've been getting bolder, more coordinated. I've been tracking them. The detective nodded and wrote it down. But he kept looking at me funny. Ranger, you said pack attack. How do you explain this? He pointed to the ground beside the fire ring. There, clear as day in the soft earth, was a boot print. Size 10, looked like a work boot. Right next to it was a paw print from a large canine. Someone was here after the attack, I said. Maybe heard the screaming, came to investigate. But even as I said it, I knew it was wrong. The prints were side by side, same depth, same age, like whatever left them had been standing right there when it happened. The detective wasn't buying it either. Ranger, these prints were made at the same time. Look at how the mud squeezed up between the boot treads and the paw pad. I looked closer. He was right. But that was impossible. I need to examine the area more, I said. Process the scene properly. You do that. But John, Bill pulled me aside. There's something else. We found this near the tree line. He handed me an evidence bag. Inside was a hunting rifle, old but well maintained, the kind my father used to carry. Actually, it was exactly the kind my father used to carry. Same model, same worn spot on the stock where he'd rest his thumb. I turned it over and felt my blood go cold. Carved into the wooden stock, faint but readable, were the initials R.S. Robert Silverwolf. My father's name. My father had died in a hunting accident when I was 12. Alone in these same woods, they never found his rifle. Where exactly did you find this? I asked. Bill pointed to a spot about 30 yards into the trees. Right there, like someone just laid it down gentle-like. I stared at that rifle and felt something cold crawl up my spine. My father had been dead for 17 years. There was no way his rifle just happened to turn up at the scene of the worst animal attack in Kentucky history. But there it was. I spent the rest of that day processing the campsite, taking photos, collecting samples. Standard procedure. But nothing about this felt standard. The more I looked, the more wrong it got. The arranging of the camp gear. That took intelligence, time. Whatever did this wasn't just killing for food. It was organizing, planning, and those tracks. I followed them for about a quarter mile before they disappeared into the rocky areas where you can't track much of anything. But in that quarter mile, I saw something that made my training seem useless. The tracks changed. Started out as normal wolf prints, big ones, but normal. Then, maybe 50 yards from the campsite, they started showing up alongside boot prints. Same ones I'd seen by the fire ring. Another 50 yards, and the wolf prints were gone. Just boot prints. Like something had changed from 4 legs to 2. I was kneeling by the last clear print when I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my neck stand up. Howling, but not like any wolf or coyote I'd ever heard. This had words in it, actual words, mixed in with the howl. I couldn't make them out, but they were there. The sound was coming from deeper in the gorge, down where the old Cherokee hunting grounds used to be. My grandmother had told me stories about those places. Said her people believed wolves and men could share spirits there. More old stories I should have listened to. I radioed Bill. I'm following the tracks deeper into the gorge. Should be back before dark. Negative, John. State police want everyone out of there by sunset. Too dangerous. This is my job, Bill. I need to track this pack before they kill someone else. A long pause. Then, 1 hour, John. That's it. And keep your radio on. I started down into the gorge. The tracks led to an old game trail I knew well. I'd hiked it dozens of times. But something was different now. The normal sounds were gone. No birds, no squirrels. Even the insects had gone. Quiet. And that smell was getting stronger. Wet dog, but mixed with something else. Something that reminded me of the locker room at the high school after a big game. Human sweat and musk. About half a mile down the trail, I found the first den. It wasn't like any wolf den I'd ever seen. For one thing, it was too big, carved into the sandstone cliff face with an opening you could walk through standing up. For another, it was furnished. I'm not kidding. Furnished. There were sleeping areas made of pine boughs and leaves, arranged neat as beds. A fire ring with cold ashes. And scattered around the edges, human belongings, backpacks, clothing, camping gear. Some of it looked fresh. Some looked like it had been there for years. I was photographing everything when I found the bones. They were arranged in a circle in the deepest part of the cave, cleaned white, organized by type, leg bones here, arm bones there, ribs stacked like cordwood, and in the center, skulls. Some were human, some were wolf, and some looked like both. I was backing out of the cave when I heard footsteps behind me. Not paw steps, footsteps. I turned around and saw him standing at the cave entrance. Tall, wearing old hunting clothes, carrying a rifle I recognized. He had my father's face, but wrong. The features were sharper, more angular. His eyes reflected light like an animal's. "Hello, Jonathan," he said in my father's voice. "I've been waiting for you." I fumbled for my radio, my tranquilizer gun, anything. But my hands wouldn't work right. This couldn't be happening. My father was dead. Had been dead for 17 years. "You're not real," I said. He smiled, and his teeth were too sharp. "Real is a funny word in these woods, son. Your grandmother knew that. That's why she gave us the name Silver Wolf. She knew we'd come home eventually. My father died in a hunting accident. Your father chose to join the pack. To protect these lands like his ancestors did. Like you will." He stepped closer, and I could see he wasn't quite human anymore. His movements were too fluid, too predatory. His fingers ended in claws instead of nails. "The Cherokee called this place sacred," he said. "Wolf Clan territory. When they were forced out, some of us stayed behind, changed ourselves so we could stay forever. Guard the old places." I found my voice. "The family at the campground. You killed them." His expression turned sad. "They were going to build condos here, Jonathan. Bought the land from the state. Going to pave over the old burial grounds, put up vacation homes. We couldn't let that happen. So you murdered them. We protected the sacred places, like we've been doing for 150 years, like your father did. Like you will. I'm not like you." He laughed, and it sounded like a howl. "You've been changing for months, son. Haven't you noticed? Your senses getting sharper? Finding for yourself running on the trails instead of walking? Feeling restless during the full moon?" I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. All those things were true. I'd been attributing them to job stress, spending too much time in the woods. "But now, the blood calls to blood," he said. "You can fight it, but it won't change what you are, what we are." Howls echoed from the forest around us. Getting closer. "The pack is coming," my father said. "You can meet them as family or as prey. Your choice." I ran. I crashed through the forest like a madman, branches tearing at my clothes, roots trying to trip me. Behind me, I could hear them coming. Howls that sounded like laughter, footsteps that were sometimes paws and sometimes boots. My radio was crackling with static, but I could make out Bill's voice. John, where are you? Report in." "Bill," I gasped into the radio. "Something's wrong here. Really wrong. I need backup." "You're breaking up. Say again?" They're not animals. They're people. They're hunting me." Static. Then, "John, you're not making sense. Are you injured?" How could I explain this? How could I tell him I'd just talked to my dead father, who turned into something with claws and sharp teeth? I made it back to my truck just as the sun was setting. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. But I managed to start it and get out of there. Drove straight to Bill's office, ran in without knocking. "Bill, we need to evacuate the whole area. Close the campgrounds, everything." He looked up from his paperwork. "John, you look like hell. What happened out there?" I tried to explain, but even as the words came out, I knew how crazy they sounded. Dead fathers who weren't dead. Wolves that walked on two legs. Dens furnished like houses. Bill listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "John," he said finally, "when's the last time you took a vacation?" "This isn't stress, Bill. I know what I saw." "You saw a wolf den and some old bones, maybe found some homeless person's camp. Your mind filled in the rest. My father's rifle was at the murder scene. Coincidence. Or someone found it years ago, been carrying it around. I could see I wasn't getting through to him. Fine, but I'm going back tomorrow with a full team. Cameras, evidence collection, the works. No, you're not. You're taking a week off, effective immediately. Go spend time with Sarah. Get some rest. But I couldn't rest. That night, lying in bed next to Sarah, I kept thinking about what my father had said. About my senses getting sharper. About feeling restless. It was true, all of it. Sarah stirred beside me. John, you're not sleeping. Just thinking about work. She sat up, looked at me in the moonlight. Something's different about you lately. You seem, I don't know, more alert. Like you're always listening for something. What do you mean? And your eyes? They're brighter somehow, more intense. I got up and looked in the bathroom mirror. She was right. My eyes looked different. Not just tired from stress, it's bisoled different. Actually different. The irises seemed larger, more reflective. When I came back to bed, Sarah was sitting up waiting for me. John, there's something I need to tell you about those animal attacks I've been treating. What about them? The bite patterns. I lied when I said they looked wrong. They don't look wrong, they look impossible. Like the animals were bitten by something with human intelligence. Predator bites, but placed exactly where they do the most damage. Like something that understood anatomy. I felt cold. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I thought I was crazy. But today, Doctor, Whitman brought in a dog that survived an attack. John, it wasn't attacked by wild animals. It was attacked by something that used tools. Tools? The wounds show knife cuts alongside bite marks, and rope burns around the legs like it was tied down first. I sat down heavily on the bed. Sarah, I need to tell you something about what I found today. I told her everything. The conversation with my father, the furnished den, the human bones arranged in circles. She listened without saying a word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. John, she said finally, my grandmother was Cherokee too, from the same area where you work. She used to tell stories about the Wolf Clan, said some of them never left when the tribe was forced out, said they found a way to stay in the old places forever. You believe me? I believe something's happening that we don't understand, and I believe you're in danger. The next morning, I went back to the gorge. Bill had ordered me to take time off, but I couldn't just sit around. I needed answers. This time, I brought real equipment. High-powered camera, night vision scope, sound recording gear. If I was going crazy, at least I'd have documentation. I set up cameras at 3 different den sites I'd found, motion-activated, infrared capable. Then I settled in to wait. Around noon, Dr. Rebecca Nighthawk showed up. She was a wildlife biologist from the university, come to study the unusual pack behavior that had been reported. Ranger Silverwolf? She called out as she approached my position. I'm Rebecca Nighthawk. I believe we have a mutual interest in these animals. Something about her immediately put me on edge. She moved too quietly for someone wearing hiking boots. Her eyes were too alert, scanning the forest like she was reading it. Dr. Nighthawk, what brings you out here? The same thing that brings you, I imagine. These aren't normal wolves. What do you mean? She smiled, and for just a second, her teeth looked too sharp. I mean their family. Before I could ask what she meant by that, my motion detectors started going off. All 3 cameras, simultaneously. They're here, she said softly. The pack came out of the forest like shadows becoming solid. 6 of them, moving in perfect coordination, but they weren't moving like wolves. They were walking upright. Each one was different. 2,000. Some more human-looking, some more wolf. But all of them were wrong in the same way my father had been wrong. Too tall, too graceful, teeth too sharp. And leading them was my father. Hello, son, he said. I see you brought a friend. Doctor. Nighthawk stepped forward. Uncle Robert, it's been too long. My father smiled. Rebecca, your parents told me you were coming. Are you ready? I've been ready for years. I looked back and forth between them. You know each other? Rebecca is your cousin, Jonathan. Her father is my brother. Wolf Clan, like us. Dr. Nighthawk, Rebecca, was changing as I watched. Her features becoming sharper, more angular. Her fingernails growing into claws. This is why I really came, she said. To help you understand what you are. What we all are. I'm human, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Look at your hands, John. I looked down. My fingernails had grown longer, harder, almost like claws. Feel your teeth. I ran my tongue over my teeth. They were sharper than they'd been that morning. The change has been happening for months, my father said, ever since you started working in pack territory. The land calls to the blood, and the blood answers. This is impossible. The Cherokee knew better, Rebecca said. They knew that some borders can't be crossed without being changed. This land is sacred to the Wolf Clan. To protect it, we became something that could protect it forever. One of the pack members stepped forward. This one looked more wolf than human, but when it spoke, its voice was clearly female. The developers are coming back, she said. Tomorrow. With bulldozers. They're going to start clearing the burial grounds. My father's expression hardened. Then we stopped them. Like you stopped the Henderson family? I asked. The Hendersons were the developers, Jonathan. They weren't just camping, they were surveying, planning where to put the access road, right through the old ceremonial grounds. So you killed them. We protected the sacred places, as we've done for generations, as you will do. I won't be a murderer. Rebecca touched my arm. John, what would you do if someone tried to pave over Arlington Cemetery or bulldoze Mount Rushmore? These places are just as sacred to us. I could feel the change accelerating. My senses were getting sharper by the minute. I could smell things I'd never smelled before. The individual scents of each pack member, the fierce smell of small animals hiding in the forest, the approaching storm still hours away. And I could feel the pack. Their emotions, their thoughts, their absolute dedication to protecting this place. The blood knows, my father said. You can fight it, but fighting only makes it harder. Accept what you are, and the change will be easier. What if I refuse? Then you die, said one of the pack members. The land doesn't allow neutral parties. You're either with us or against us. That's not a choice. It's the same choice we all made, Rebecca said. And once you make it, you'll understand why it's not really a choice at all. She was fully changed now, still recognizably human, but clearly something else. Her eyes glowed in the forest shadows, and when she moved, it was with liquid grace. The developers will be here at dawn, my father said. You need to decide before then. Help us protect the sacred grounds, or try to stop us and die trying. There has to be another way. What other way? Talk to them? Offer them money? We tried that for 150 years. The only thing they understand is force. I thought about Sarah, about my job, about the life I'd built. All of it would be gone if I made this choice. But I could feel the sacredness of this place now, could sense the generations of Cherokee who'd lived and died here, who'd called it holy. The burial grounds weren't just old bones, they were the resting place of an entire people's ancestors. And tomorrow, bulldozers were going to plow them under to build vacation condos. If I do this, I said, if I help you, what happens to my human life? It changes, my father said. But it doesn't end. You'll still be you, Jonathan. Just more. The storm I'd smelled earlier was getting closer. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I need time to think. There is no time, Rebecca said. The change is accelerating, whether you accept it or not. Fight it much longer, and it'll tear you apart. She was right. I could feel something fundamental shifting inside me. My bones ached. My muscles felt like they were rewiring themselves. Will I be able to see Sarah? Have a normal relationship? Your grandmother was married to a human for 60 years, my father said. She managed. Grandmother was like you? How do you think we knew to give you the name Silverwolf? Everything clicked into place, the stories grandmother had told. The way she'd always seemed to know things about the forest that nobody else knew. Her insistence that some places were sacred and should never be disturbed. The developers' bulldozers would be here in 6 hours. I made my choice. The change hurt worse than anything I'd ever experienced. Like every bone in my body was breaking and healing at the same time. But Rebecca was right. Accepting it made it easier. Instead of fighting the transformation, I let it happen. When it was over, I was still me. But I was also something else. My senses were incredibly sharp, my strength had doubled, and I could feel the pack's presence like a warm current in my mind. We stopped the developers. Not by killing them, we'd learned from the Henderson mistake. Instead, we made them understand that this land was protected. When the bulldozer operators saw 6 wolf-human shapes emerge from the forest at dawn, they decided their paychecks weren't worth it. The development company tried to send security teams. They left too, after finding their equipment rearranged into ritualistic patterns every morning. Eventually, the state stepped in. Turns out there were legal protections for Cherokee burial grounds that had never been properly enforced. The land was redesignated as a protected cultural site. I kept my job as a ranger. Actually, I got promoted. Turns out having supernatural senses makes you really good at wildlife management. I just had to be careful about how I explained my sudden improvement in tracking skills. Sarah took the change better than I'd expected. She'd suspected something was different for months. When I finally showed her my transformed state, her first words were, "So that's why you've been sniffing everything lately." We're still engaged, planning a spring wedding. Rebecca's helping with the arrangements, and BC. Apparently the pack has some very specific traditions about wedding ceremonies. Bill never figured out what really happened. He thinks the developers backed down due to legal pressure and my improved investigation techniques. I let him think that. The pack still guards the old places. There are others, Cherokee burial grounds scattered throughout the forest that need protection. And we've heard reports of other packs, other guardians, at sacred sites across the country. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I think about those bulldozers heading for grandmother's ancestors' graves. And I know I did. The land remembers, the blood remembers. And some things are worth protecting, no matter what it costs. If you're ever hiking in Daniel, Boone National Forest, stick to the marked trails. Respect the posted boundaries. And if you hear howling that sounds like it has words in it, don't go looking for the source. Some secrets are meant to stay in the woods. But if you've got Cherokee blood and you feel the forest calling to you, if your senses are getting sharper and you find yourself running instead of walking, well, maybe it's time you came home. The pack is always looking for family, and family takes care of family, forever. My name is Gabriel Blackthorne, and I've been a forest ranger for 18 years now. People think that's a long time, but for me, every day feels like I'm paying back a debt I can never fully settle. See, before I became a ranger, I was a coal miner down in Shawnee State Forest. That was back in 1954, when I was just 23 years old. I worked the deep shafts with 23 other men, good men with families and dreams. We went down into the earth together that October morning, but I was the only one who came back up. The mine collapsed. I still don't know why I survived when they didn't. Maybe I was closer to the exit. Maybe I was just lucky. But for 18 years, I've carried their names in my head like stones. Every night, I see their faces in my dreams. Every morning, I wake up wondering why it was me who lived. That's why I became a ranger. Someone has to make sure the abandoned mines don't hurt anyone else. Someone has to keep people safe from the dark holes we left behind when the coal ran out. It was late October when I got the call about Tar Hollow. The old strip mining site had been shut down for years, but hikers sometimes wandered through there. The sheriff found a body, Jimmy Martinez, who used to operate the heavy equipment before the site closed. Poor guy had been torn apart pretty bad. I drove out there on a Tuesday morning. The air was too warm for October, sticky and thick like summer, but with a smell that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the usual mine smell of sulfur and old machinery. This was something else, something rotten. The mining site stretched out like a wound in the earth. Open pits filled with stagnant water reflected the gray sky. Rusted equipment sat where it had been abandoned, slowly being swallowed by weeds and vines. But it was the silence that got to me most. No birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed afraid to make noise here. I found where Jimmy died near the equipment shed. The sheriff's tape was still up, but the body was gone. What remained was a dark stain on the ground, and something that made my hands shake when I saw it. Bite marks. In the metal of Jimmy's bulldozer, there were bite marks. Human teeth had chewed into solid steel like it was soft bread. I've seen a lot of strange things in 18 years of ranger work. Animals do weird stuff when they're starving or sick. But this was different. These weren't animal bites. The marks were too organized, too purposeful, like someone had been trying to eat the machine itself. I pulled out my gas detector and started checking the air around the mine shafts. Sometimes methane builds up in old mines and makes people see things that aren't there. The detector started clicking right away, but the readings were all wrong. It was picking up methane, sure, but mixed with something else. Something that registered like human breath. That's when I noticed the graves. Back behind the equipment yard, there was an old cemetery. Local families had been burying their dead there for over 100 years. But somebody had been digging. Fresh dirt was piled up around several graves, and the holes went deep. What bothered me was that the digging seemed to come from inside the graves, not from above. I walked closer and looked down into one of the empty holes. The wooden coffin was split open from the inside, like something had punched its way out. The burial clothes were still there, a faded blue dress, old work boots, a wedding ring on a bit of finger bone. But the body was gone. My radio crackled to life. Static filled the air. And then I heard voices, men calling for help, men trapped underground. For a second, my heart stopped, because I recognized those voices. They were my mining crew from 1954. I switched off the radio fast. Too fast. My hands were shaking again. Just gas, I told myself out loud. Just methane making you hear things. But as I walked back toward my truck, I found something that made my blood turn cold. Sitting on the hood of my vehicle was an old mining helmet, dented and scratched, with a headlamp that hadn't worked in 20 years. I knew that helmet. It belonged to Frank Sullivan, my shift supervisor from the 1954 disaster, the helmet that should have been buried with Frank 18 years ago. I picked it up with trembling hands. Inside the hard hat, someone had scratched a message into the metal. "We're still hungry, Gabe." I should have left right then. Should have called for backup and stayed away from Tar Hollow until morning. But something kept me there as the sun started to set. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the feeling that I owed those voices on the radio an explanation. I decided to check the mine shafts one more time before dark. The main shaft was supposed to be sealed, but the metal grate that covered the entrance was torn open. Not cut or broken, torn, like giant hands had, ripped it apart. The opening led down into complete darkness, and when I shined my flashlight into the hole, the beam just disappeared, like the dark was swallowing the light. I heard breathing coming from down there. Slow, ragged breathing, like someone trying to breathe through damaged lungs. "Hello?" I called down. "Is someone hurt down there?" The breathing stopped. Then I heard footsteps, slow and shuffling, coming up from the depths. I backed away from the shaft entrance and pulled out my emergency radio. "This is Ranger Blackthorn at Tar Hollow. I need backup. There's someone trapped in the old mine shaft." Static answered me. Then those voices again, my dead crew calling my name. "Gabe, Gabe, where are you? We've been waiting. We're so hungry, Gabe." I dropped the radio and ran, but I didn't get far before I saw them. 3 figures were walking between the abandoned mining equipment. They moved wrong, like their joints didn't work right anymore. Like they were learning how to walk all over again. In the dim light, I could see they were wearing old mining clothes, the kind we wore back in 1954. One of them turned toward me, and I saw his face. It was Frank Sullivan, my old shift supervisor. But Frank had been dead for 18 years, buried in the cemetery behind the equipment yard. The cemetery, where someone had been digging up graves. Frank's face was gray and sunken, with dark holes where his eyes should be. His mining helmet sat crooked on his skull, and when he opened his mouth to speak, I could see that half his teeth were missing. "Gabe," he said, and his voice sounded like air escaping from a broken pipe. "We've been looking for you." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "Frank, but you died in the mine collapse." "Did we?" Frank tilted his head like he was thinking hard about something. "Feels like we've been walking around for a while now. Feels like we've been hungry." The other 2 figures started moving toward me. I recognized them too. Joey Martinez and Bill Kowalski from my mining crew. Like Frank, they looked like they'd been dead for a long time, but somehow they were still walking around. "What happened to you?" I whispered. "Same thing that should have happened to you," Joey said. His voice was wet, like he was talking through a mouthful of mud. We got buried, but not proper-like. Company dumped us in a hole and covered us up quick. Didn't want bad publicity. Been trying to rest? Bill added. But we can't, not while you're still walking around up here. Frank stepped closer. I could smell him now, earth and rot and something metallic like old blood. You were supposed to die with us, Gabe. You were supposed to be down there when the ceiling came down. I don't know why I lived. I don't know why you died. Neither do we, Frank said. But we've been thinking about it for 18 years. Down in the dark. And we figured something out. He reached out with one gray hand and touched my chest, right over my heart. His fingers were cold as winter stone. You lived because you were supposed to fix this. You lived because we need you to help us rest. I don't understand. You will, Frank said, when you're hungry like us. That's when I noticed my radio was working again. But instead of static, I could hear someone calling for help. A voice I recognized. This is Tom Gravedigger, mine safety inspector. My truck broke down near Tar Hollow. Can anyone hear me? I think something's following me. Tom was my colleague from the state office, a good man who helped me inspect dangerous mine sites. And now he was out here in the dark with Frank and the others. Frank smiled, showing his broken teeth. Looks like dinner just arrived. I found Tom's truck about a quarter-mile down the access road. The engine was smoking, and all 4 tires had been slashed. Not cut, chewed. Like something with very big teeth had taken bites out of the rubber. Tom was crouched behind the truck with a flashlight and a pistol. When he saw me coming, he nearly shot me by accident. Jesus, Gabe. Thank God it's you. Tom was shaking. There's something wrong with this place. I've been seeing people walking around, but they don't look right. How many people? At least 6 or 7, maybe more. They keep coming out of the mine shafts. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. I tried to talk to one of them, asked if he needed help. He just stared at me and said he was hungry. I looked back toward the mining site. More figures were moving between the equipment now. Some I recognized from my old crew. Others looked like they'd been dead even longer. Tom, we need to get out of here. Right now. My truck's not going anywhere. Whatever chewed up the tires also did something to the engine. Then we walk. There's a ranger station about 10 miles south we can call for help from there. But as we started walking, I realized the hungry dead were following us. They moved slowly, but they never stopped, and there were more of them now, way more. Gabe, Tom said after we'd been walking for an hour, I'm really hungry. I looked at him. His face was pale and sweaty, but his eyes looked different, darker, like something was changing behind them. When's the last time you ate? This morning. Had breakfast with my wife before I drove out here. Tom rubbed his stomach. But I feel like I haven't eaten in days. Weeks, maybe. That's when I understood. The hunger was spreading. Whatever was wrong with Frank and the others, it was catching. Tom, listen to me. You're not really hungry. It's this place. It's doing something to people. I am hungry, Tom said, and when he looked at me, I saw that his teeth looked sharper than they should. I'm so hungry I could eat anything. Even. He stopped talking and stared at my arm. I backed away from him. Tom, fight it. Whatever you're feeling, fight it. Can't, Tom whispered. It's like there's something inside me, eating me from the inside out, and the only way to make it stop is to feed it. Tom lunged at me. I dodged and started running, but I could hear him behind me. His footsteps were getting heavier, clumsier, like he was forgetting how to run properly. I made it back to my truck and locked the doors just as Tom caught up. He pressed his face against the driver's side window and smiled. His teeth were definitely sharper now, and his skin was starting to turn gray. Gabe, he said through the glass, you can't run forever, and when you get tired, we'll be waiting. I started the engine and drove toward the main road as fast as I could. But in my rearview mirror, I could see them. Dozens of figures walking out of the mining site. Some were from my 1,954 crew. Others looked like they'd been dead for years, maybe decades. And they were all following my truck. I drove for 20 minutes before I realized something was wrong. The road should have led to the highway, but instead, it kept curving back toward Tar Hollow. Every turn I took, every path I followed, led back to the mining site. It was like the dead were hurting me, like they wanted me to come back. Finally, I gave up and parked the truck on a hill overlooking the site. I could see them down there, maybe 50 or 60 people walking around the abandoned equipment. Some were digging new holes. Others were carrying things I didn't want to look at too closely. I pulled out my radio and tried to call for help, but all I got were voices from my old mining crew. "Come back, Gabe," Frank's voice said through the static. "We need to show you something." "Show me what?" "Where they put us. Where they dumped our bodies after the mine collapsed." "Frank, you're dead. You've been dead for 18 years. Have we? Or have we just been waiting?" The radio went quiet for a moment. Then Frank spoke again, and his voice sounded different. Sadder. "We never got a proper burial, Gabe. Company just threw us in a pit and covered us up. Didn't even tell our families where we were. Your guilt, your survivor's guilt, it's been calling to us all these years, keeping us from resting. I don't understand." "You will. Come back to the site. Let us show you the truth." I sat in my truck for a long time, watching the dead people walking around below. Part of me wanted to drive away and never come back. But a bigger part of me knew that Frank was right. I'd been carrying their deaths for 18 years, and maybe it was time to finally face what really happened in that mine. I started the truck and drove back down to Tar Hollow. Frank was waiting for me at the mine shaft entrance. Up close, he looked even worse than before. His skin was gray-green and peeling, and I could see bone through holes in his cheek. But his eyes looked sad and tired. "Thank you for coming back," he said. "What do you want from me, Frank?" "We want to show you where we really are, where our bodies have been all these years." He led me to the main mine shaft and pointed down into the darkness. "We're not buried in the cemetery, Gabe. We never were. The mining company lied." I shined my flashlight down the shaft. About 30 feet down, I could see something that made my stomach turn. Bones. Lots of bones, mixed with rotted mining clothes and broken equipment. "They threw us down here," Frank said. "All 23 of us. Just dumped us in the shaft and sealed it up. Told everyone we were buried proper in the cemetery. But the graves, the headstones, empty boxes. Nothing in them but rocks and dirt." I stared down at the bones of my friends and coworkers. Men I'd eaten lunch with, joked with, worked alongside for years. They'd been rotting in this hole while I lived my life above ground. "The Shawnee say this is sacred ground," Frank continued. "Say when people aren't buried right, their spirits can't rest. We've been trapped down there, getting hungrier and hungrier, while you walked around feeling guilty. I tried to live a good life," I whispered. "I became a ranger to help people, to make sure this didn't happen again. We know. But guilt ain't enough, Gabe. We need justice. We need to rest." "Tell me how." Frank smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the man I remembered from 1954. "You have to join us. You have to complete the 24. You want me to die. We want you to accept responsibility. You lived when we died. Now you have to balance the scales." Other figures were gathering around us, my whole mining crew, plus dozens of others. People who died in mining accidents over the years, all of them improperly buried, all of them hungry for justice. "What about Tom? What happens to him?" "He'll rest when we do. The hunger will leave him when we're finally at peace." I looked down at the bones in the shaft again. My friends, who'd trusted me to keep them safe underground. Who'd died while I lived. "If I do this, if I join you, will you finally rest?" "We will. But not the way you think." Frank reached out and took my hand. His skin was cold and rough like tree bark, but his grip was gentle. "There's another way, Gabe. The Shawnee know it. Proper burial ceremony, recognition of the sacred ground, acknowledgement of the truth." "I don't understand." "You don't have to die. You just have to die to your guilt. Accept that you survived for a reason. Help us get the burial we deserve." As Frank spoke, I felt something changing in my chest. The weight I'd carried for 18 years was shifting, getting lighter. Not disappearing, but transforming into something else. Something that felt like purpose instead of guilt. What do I need to do? First, tell the truth. Tell everyone what really happened to us. Then work with the Shawnee to make this right. I nodded. "And Tom?" Will be himself again when the hunger leaves this place. Frank squeezed my hand one more time, then let go. We've been waiting so long, Gabe. We can wait a little longer. But not much longer. As he spoke, dawn was breaking over the mining site. In the early morning light, Frank and the others started to look less solid, more like shadows. We'll be here, Frank said as he faded away. Waiting for justice. It took 3 months to make things right. First, I had to convince the authorities that there were bodies in the mine shaft. That wasn't easy, since officially, all 23 victims of the 1,954 disaster had been buried in the cemetery. But when the forensics team finally went down into the shaft, they found exactly what Frank had shown me. The mining company had been long out of business, but there were still records. Documents that showed they'd known the mine was dangerous, but had kept it open anyway. Papers that proved they'd covered up the real cause of the collapse and lied about where the bodies were buried. Tom recovered completely once we started the investigation. The hunger left him gradually, like a fever breaking. He didn't remember much about that night, which was probably for the best. The hardest part was working with the Shawnee Tribal Council. I had to admit that the mining site was built on sacred burial ground, and that decades of mining had disturbed their ancestors' rest. The Hunger Walkers weren't just my crew, they were all the improperly buried dead whose peace had been shattered by our digging. But the tribal elders were kind to me. They said they'd been waiting for someone to acknowledge the truth and ask for help. They knew the right ceremonies, the proper rituals, to put restless spirits to sleep. We held the burial ceremony on a cold December morning. All 23 members of my crew were given proper graves in a new cemetery, blessed by both Christian ministers and Shawnee spiritual leaders. The tribal council performed cleansing rituals over the entire mining site, asking forgiveness from the disturbed spirits. I felt them leave during the ceremony, like a weight lifting off my shoulders, like voices that had been whispering in my ear for 18 years finally falling silent. I still work as a forest ranger. I still inspect abandoned mines and keep people safe from the holes we left behind. But now I work with the tribal council too, making sure that mining sites respect sacred ground and that the dead are properly honored. Sometimes, late at night, I drive past Tar Hollow. The mining equipment is gone now, and the shafts are properly sealed. The land is healing, growing green again. Birds sing there now. Insects buzz in the summer heat. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the air is still, I can hear Frank's voice on the wind. Not calling for help this time, not hungry anymore, just saying thank you, and that's enough for me. Because some debts can be paid, some guilt can be transformed into purpose, and some dead can finally rest, if you're brave enough to face the truth and do what's right. My name is Gabriel Blackthorne, and I learned that the dead don't always stay buried, but they don't have to stay hungry either. Not if someone cares enough to feed them justice instead of flesh. Asterisk. Final word count. Approximately 4,200 words. Asterisk. My name is Matthew Thornfield, and I've been a forest ranger for 14 years now. Before that, I spent 8 years as a DEA agent in Miami, chasing drug dealers through city streets and busting cocaine labs and warehouses. I thought I'd seen everything bad people could do to each other. I was wrong. I came to the Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee because I was burned out. Too many shootouts, too many dead bodies, too many nights lying awake wondering if the guy I arrested had kids who wouldn't see their dad again. My wife Sarah couldn't handle it anymore. She said, I came home every day looking like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. The forest seemed like the perfect place to start over. Clean air, tall trees, and my job was mostly checking on campers and making sure people didn't litter. Sometimes I'd help with research on plants and animals. It was peaceful, or it was supposed to be. I specialized in something called botanical law enforcement. Fancy words for finding people who grow illegal drugs in the forest. Marijuana mostly. Sometimes other stuff. My DEA training helped me spot the signs. Cleared areas hidden from trails, irrigation systems, chemical smells. Most growers were just regular folks trying to make money. I'd arrest them, they'd pay a fine, everyone moved on. The Cherokee National Forest is huge, over 650,000 acres, spread across Tennessee and North Carolina. My section was the Unicoi Mountains, way up in the remote areas where tourists don't go. Perfect place for someone to hide illegal plants. Perfect place for a lot of things, as it turned out. It was late September when everything started. The leaves were changing colors, and there was this smell in the air. Not just autumn leaves, but something else. Something green and earthy and almost alive. I'd been hiking through an area called Roan Mountain, checking some caves where we'd had reports of drug activity. The mountains here are old, really old. The Cherokee. People lived here for thousands of years before white settlers came. They had names for every ridge, every valley, every stream. Most of those names are forgotten now, but sometimes you'll meet an old-timer who remembers a few words. They always get this look in their eyes when they talk about the old places, like they're remembering something they're not supposed to say. I was following a deer trail that morning when I smelled it. That sharp, chemical smell that means someone's been using fertilizer where they shouldn't. My radio crackled with static as I called it in. Base, this is Thornfield. I've got possible cultivation activity in Sector 7. Moving to investigate. Copy that, Matthew. Be careful out there. I switched off the radio and pulled out my camera. The DEA had taught me to document everything. Take pictures first, ask questions later. Evidence doesn't lie, and it doesn't change its story in court. The trail led down into a hidden valley between two ridges. The trees grew thick here, blocking out most of the sunlight, but there was definitely something wrong. The plants looked too green, too healthy. In nature, you don't see perfect rows of anything. But here, someone had been very busy. I followed my nose toward the chemical smell. My boots made soft sounds on the forest floor, and I could hear water running somewhere nearby. Probably a creek. Drug growers always set up near water sources. That's when I found the first body. Agent Rodriguez from the Atlanta DEA office was lying face up in a patch of what looked like herbs. His eyes were wide open, staring at the sky. His skin had a weird blue color, like he'd been poisoned. There was foam around his mouth, and his hands were twisted into claws. I'd seen plenty of dead bodies in Miami, but this was different. Rodriguez looked terrified. More than terrified, he looked like he'd seen something impossible right before he died. I pulled out my radio, but all I got was too static. The mountains could be tricky with radio signals, especially down in the valleys. I'd have to hike back up to higher ground to call for help, but first I needed to secure the scene. That's what they teach you. Protect the evidence. Document everything. Don't contaminate the site. I started taking pictures of Rodriguez and the area around him. That's when I noticed the plants. They weren't marijuana. They weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. Some had leaves as big as dinner plates. Others had bright red berries that seemed to glow in the dim light. The smell was incredible, like someone had mixed a flower shop with a medicine cabinet, and they were arranged in perfect circles around Rodriguez's body. No wind could do that. No animal would do that. Someone, not or something, had moved those plants after Rodriguez died. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. In 14 years of forest work and 8 years of DEA operations, I'd learned to trust. That feeling. It meant danger. I needed to get out of that valley and call for backup. But as I turned to leave, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Singing. A woman's voice. Singing in a language I didn't recognize. It was coming from deeper in the valley, where the plants grew thickest. The smart thing would have been to run. The DEA had taught me that sometimes the smart thing is the only thing that keeps you alive. But Rodriguez was dead, and somebody had killed him. As a law enforcement officer, I had a duty to investigate. I checked my gun, made sure my camera was working, and started walking toward the singing. The singing got louder as I moved deeper into the valley. It wasn't English, and it wasn't Spanish. The words sounded old, like they'd been sung for hundreds of years. They seemed to echo off the trees, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The plants around me were getting stranger. I saw flowers that shouldn't exist in Tennessee, experience foursomes, tropical blooms in colors that hurt to look at, vines twisted around tree trunks in patterns that looked almost like writing. The air was thick with pollen that made my eyes water and my head feel fuzzy. I stopped to wipe my eyes and check my camera. The pictures I'd taken of Rodriguez looked wrong on the little screen. There were shadows in them that I didn't remember seeing. Shapes that might have been people, standing at the edges of the frame. Must be the light, I muttered to myself. Mountain valleys could play tricks with shadows. The singing stopped. The silence was worse than the singing. In a healthy forest, you hear birds, insects, small animals moving through the underbrush. Here, there was nothing. Even the creek had gone quiet. I found the second body 30 yards from the first. Agent Williams from the Nashville office was curled up like he'd died in terrible pain. His hands were covered in some kind of green paste, and there were leaves stuck to his face. The plants around him were even more organized than the ones around Rodriguez, arranged in complicated patterns that looked like they meant something. I took more pictures, trying to stay professional. 2 federal agents dead in what should have been a routine drug bust. This wasn't some grower protecting his crop. This was something else. The smell was stronger here, sweet and bitter at the same time, like medicine mixed with perfume. It made my head swim and my stomach turn. I'd smelled a lot of illegal drugs in my DEA days, but nothing like this. I knelt down to examine Williams more closely. His radio was missing, and his gun was still in its holster. No signs of a struggle, no bullet wounds or knife cuts. Just that weird blue color to his skin and the terror frozen on his face. Poison, I said out loud, just to hear my own voice. Some kind of plant poison. That made sense. Drug growers sometimes used booby traps to protect their crops. Maybe they'd developed some new kind of toxic plant extract. The DEA had seen stranger things, but that didn't explain the way the plants were arranged. Or the singing. Or why my camera kept showing things that weren't there. I stood up and immediately felt dizzy. The pollen in the air was definitely affecting me. I needed to get to higher ground, call for backup, and let the crime scene team figure out what had happened here. That's when I saw her. An old woman was standing about 50 feet away, between 2 huge oak trees. She was small and thin, with long gray hair that hung down to her waist. She wore a simple brown dress that looked like it was made from rough cloth. Her feet were bare, but it was her face that made me freeze. She looked like she'd been burned, badly. The skin was twisted and scarred, and one of her eyes was clouded white. The other eye, the good one, was staring right at me. "You came back," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly through the still air. She was speaking English now, but with an accent I couldn't place. "Ma'am, I'm a federal officer," I called out, keeping my hand near my gun. "I need you to step forward slowly with your hands visible." She smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Her teeth were stained green, and when she opened her mouth, I could smell that same sweet bitter plant smell. "You don't remember me, do you, Matthew?" She knew my name. That was bad. Really bad. "Have we met before, ma'am?" "Oh yes, 3 years ago. You and your friends came to my garden." She gestured toward the strange plants around us. "You brought fire and poison. You killed my medicine. 3 years ago, that would have been during my last year with the DEA. We'd done a lot of raids in Tennessee that year, hit some big cultivation operations in the mountains. But I didn't remember this woman. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning." She laughed, and the sound made the leaves on the trees shake. "You're in my garden now, Matthew. You're breathing my air, walking on my ground. Do you feel it yet?" I did feel it. The dizziness was getting worse, and my vision was starting to blur at the edges. The pollen, the plants. Whatever this woman had done to Rodriguez and Williams, she was doing it to me too. I pulled out my gun. "Stay back." Too late for that. She raised her hand, and I saw that her fingers were stained green like her teeth. "You destroyed my life's work. 40 years of growing, learning, healing. Gone in one morning because you thought you knew better." The pieces started clicking together. A raid 3 years ago. Burned cultivation sites. An old woman who'd been growing something more than just marijuana. "The Henderson Valley raid," I whispered. Her good eye brightened. "You do remember." I did remember. We'd hit a massive growing operation hidden in a valley about 20 miles from here. Hundreds of plants, elaborate irrigation systems, someone who really knew what they were doing. But when we got there, we found more than just marijuana. There were plants from all over the world, arranged in careful patterns. The grower had built what looked like a traditional herb garden. There had been an old woman there. She'd tried to stop us from burning the plants, said they were medicine, not drugs. She'd fought us when we lit the fires, screaming in some foreign language. I remembered thinking she was just a crazy old lady protecting her illegal crops. She'd been burned in the fire. Badly burned? We'd called an ambulance, but when it arrived at the hospital, she was gone. Disappeared from the emergency room while the doctors were treating her. We figured she'd run off to avoid prosecution. "You died?" I said. "The doctors said you died from your burns." "I did die," she said, taking a step closer. "But death isn't the end for someone who knows the right plants, the right medicines. Death is just another kind of healing." That was impossible. People don't come back from the dead. But looking at her burned face, breathing air that made reality feel loose and slippery, I was starting to doubt what was possible and what wasn't. "Your friends learned about my medicine," she said, gesturing toward the bodies. "They tasted what 40 years of knowledge can create. Plants that don't exist in your books, compounds that don't show up in your tests. You murdered federal agents." I gave them exactly what they gave me: justice. The air was getting thicker. I could barely keep my gun steady. The woman was walking closer, and with each step, the plants around her seemed to lean in, like they were listening. "What do you want?" I managed to ask. "I want you to understand," she said. "I want you to feel what it's like to have your life's work destroyed, to see everything you've built turn to ash." She was close enough now that I could see the details of her scars. Close enough to smell the plant odors that clung to her like perfume. Close enough to see that her clouded eye wasn't just damaged. It was moving, searching, looking at things I couldn't see. "I want you to know my medicine from the inside out." She blew across her green-stained palm, and a cloud of golden pollen filled the air between us. I tried to hold my breath, tried to run, tried to shoot. But my body wasn't obeying me anymore. The pollen filled my lungs, and suddenly the world exploded into colors I didn't have names for. The last thing I saw before I passed out was the old woman's burned face, smiling as the forest itself seemed to reach out and pull me down into the earth. I woke up with my face in the dirt, and my head feeling like someone had filled it with cotton. The sun was lower in the sky. I'd been out for hours. My gun was gone, and my radio was nothing but static, and a woman's voice speaking in that same old language I'd heard before. The Cherokee language. I was sure of it now. I sat up slowly, fighting waves of nausea. The plants around me had changed. They were bigger, more colorful, and they seemed to move even when there wasn't any wind. Some of them had flowers that looked like faces, twisted, angry faces that watched me as I tried to stand. Rodriguez and Williams were still there, but something was different about their bodies. The plants had grown over them, wrapping around their arms and legs like they were trying to pull them down into the earth. Green shoots were growing out of their mouths and eyes. I stumbled away from them, looking for a way out of the valley, but every trail I tried led deeper into the plant maze. The woman, the witch, I was starting to think of her as 10-something, had done something to this place, made it bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. That's when I heard the helicopter. DEA helicopters have a distinctive sound, and I knew they were looking for Rodriguez and Williams. I tried to signal them, waving my arms and shouting, but they passed right over without slowing down, like they couldn't see me, or like I wasn't really there anymore. I found a stream and splashed water on my face, trying to clear my head. The water tasted wrong, too sweet, with an aftertaste that reminded me of the plant smells. Everything in this valley was poisoned. "Matthew." I spun around. The witch was standing on the other side of the stream, but she looked different. Younger. The burns on her face were healing as I watched, the scars fading until she looked like a normal old woman. Her clouded eye cleared, and both eyes were now a deep brown that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. "How are you feeling?" she asked, like we were old friends. "What did you do to me?" "I gave you a taste of my medicine, just a small one. Your friends got the full treatment." She gestured, and I looked back at Rodriguez and Williams. They were sitting up now, even though I knew they were dead. Their eyes were black holes, and green vines were growing out of their mouths like tongues. "They're helping me with my garden now," the witch said. "Death is just another kind of life, if you know the right plants." I backed away from the stream, but there was nowhere to go. The plants had grown taller while I wasn't looking, forming walls on both sides of the water. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to keep her talking while I figured out how to escape. "I was called Sarah Crow Feather," she said. "But your people called me other things. Drug dealer, criminal, threat to society." Sarah Crow Feather. The name meant something, but I couldn't quite remember what. "I wasn't a drug dealer," she continued. "I was a medicine woman, the last one who remembered the old ways, the old plants. My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her, going back to the time before your people came to these mountains." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Sarah Crow Feather, the Cherokee Botanical Preserve. 3 years ago, the DEA had received reports of a massive drug operation hidden in the national forest. When we investigated, we found what looked like marijuana cultivation on an incredible scale. But when we got there, we realized it was something else entirely. Someone had created a living library of plants, not just marijuana, but hundreds of species from all over the world. Medicinal plants that had been brought to America by Cherokee traders centuries ago. Plants that didn't exist in any modern botanical database. The old woman had tried to explain, tried to show us records written in Cherokee syllabary, tried to make us understand that we were looking at irreplaceable cultural heritage. But all we saw were illegal plants. We burned it all. "You destroyed 40 years of my life's work in one morning," Sarah said, her voice growing harder. 40 years of growing, learning, preserving knowledge that was already almost lost. Plants that don't exist anywhere else in the world. "We were following the law," I said weakly. "Your law, not mine, not my people's." She was walking across the stream now, her bare feet not even making ripples in the water. The plants around her swayed like they were dancing to music I couldn't hear. "Do you know what peyote is, Matthew?" I nodded. Peyote was a cactus that contained mescaline, a powerful hallucinogen. It was illegal under federal law, but some Native American tribes were allowed to use it for religious purposes. "Do you know what ayahuasca is?" Another nod. "A plant mixture from South America that shamans used for spiritual visions. Also illegal." "Do you know about the Cherokee medicine plants that could cure cancer? The ones that could heal burns without leaving scars? The ones that could let a medicine woman speak with the dead?" I didn't know about those. Nobody did, because they didn't exist. Plants couldn't do those things. "They existed in my garden," Sarah said, reading my thoughts. "Until you burned them." She was close enough to touch me now. Her fingers were still stained green, and I could see tiny flowers growing under her fingernails. "I spent 3 days dying in your hospital," she said. 3 days feeling my body shut down from the burns you gave me. But I had hidden some seeds, sewn them into my dress, and when I died, I planted them in my own body." She opened her mouth, and I saw that her tongue was covered in tiny leaves. Death is just compost for the right kind of garden. Behind her, Rodriguez and Williams were standing up. They moved like puppets, their bodies stiff and wrong. More plants were growing out of them now. Bright flowers where their eyes should be. Vines wrapped around their necks like jewelry. "They're going to help me plant a new garden," Sarah said. "A garden that will grow in the hearts of everyone who Elas destroyed the old one." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. Whatever she'd made me breathe was still in my system, making everything feel dreamlike and impossible. "Doctor, Susan Brightleaf will be here soon," Sarah said casually. "She's the botanist your people sent to figure out what killed your friends. She has Cherokee blood in her, you know. She'll understand my medicine better than you ever could." A botanist, that meant backup was coming. Someone who might be able to help me figure out what was real and what was hallucination. "But first," Sarah said, reaching into a pouch at her waist, "you need to understand what you destroyed." She threw a handful of seeds into the air, and they burst into flames before hitting the ground. The smoke that rose from them was thick and green, and when I breathed it, the world changed. Suddenly I was standing in Sarah's garden as it had been 3 years ago. Not the twisted plant maze I was trapped in now, but a beautiful, organized paradise. Rows of carefully tended plants from around the world. Traditional Cherokee medicine gardens mixed with specimens from Asia, Africa, South America, a living museum of botanical knowledge. I saw Sarah as she had been, younger, unburned, working with patient dedication to preserve plants that were dying out in their native habitats. I saw her notebooks, written in both English and Cherokee, documenting the properties and uses of hundreds of species. I saw her laboratory, where she carefully extracted and tested compounds that could heal diseases modern medicine couldn't touch. And then, I saw myself, leading a team of DEA agents through her garden like an invading army, pouring gasoline on irreplaceable plants, setting fire to centuries of accumulated knowledge. I saw Sarah trying to stop us, screaming that we didn't understand what we were destroying. I saw her running into the burning garden to save what she could. I saw her dress catch fire as she tried to rescue a plant that existed nowhere else on Earth. The vision faded, and I was back in the twisted valley with the dead agents and the impossible plants. Now, you know, Sarah said. Now you understand what you took from the world. She was right. I had destroyed something irreplaceable. But that didn't make what she was doing right. Killing people won't bring your plants back? I said. No, she agreed. But it will make sure no one else destroys what I'm rebuilding. The sound of footsteps made us both turn. Someone was crashing through the underbrush, calling my name. Ranger Thornfield? This is Dr. Brightleaf. Are you out there? Sarah smiled, and flowers bloomed in her hair. Perfect timing, she said. Dr. Susan Brightleaf stumbled into the clearing like she'd been running for hours. She was a small woman with dark hair and Cherokee features, wearing hiking boots and a backpack full of scientific equipment. When she saw me, relief flooded her face. Thank God you're alive, she said. I've been tracking the GPS signal from Agent Rodriguez's radio for, oh my God. She'd seen the bodies. Rodriguez and Williams were still standing, swaying slightly like trees in a breeze. The plants growing out of them had bloomed into flowers that looked almost like small faces. What happened here, Doctor? Brightleaf whispered. Susan, Sarah said, and Dr. Brightleaf spun toward her voice. I've been waiting for you. Dr. Brightleaf stared at Sarah for a long moment. Her face went through several expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally something that might have been awe. Sarah Crow Feather, she said, but you're supposed to be dead. Death is just another kind of medicine. Sarah replied, you, of all people, should understand that. Doctor. Brightleaf set down her backpack slowly, like she was afraid sudden movements might break whatever spell was holding this place together. My grandmother told me stories about you, she said, about the last medicine woman, the one who knew the old plant ways. Your grandmother was Mary Brightleaf, Sarah said. She helped me gather bloodroot when you were just a baby. You knew my grandmother? I taught her how to make the tea that eased her arthritis. She was one of the few who remembered that plants are more than just chemicals. I watched this conversation with growing alarm. Dr. Brightleaf was supposed to be here to help me understand what was happening. Instead, she seemed to be falling under Sarah's influence. Dr. Brightleaf, I said, these people are dead. She killed them with some kind of plant poison. Dr. Brightleaf looked at the bodies again, then at Sarah, then at the impossible garden around us. What kind of plants? She asked. Sarah gestured, and the flowers growing from Rodriguez's eye sockets turned toward Dr. Brightleaf. They were beautiful in a terrible way, deep red petals with yellow, centers that pulsed like heartbeats. Cherokee healing vine, Sarah said, mixed with Australian ghost orchid and African resurrection flower. Plants that don't exist in your books because your people destroyed the only specimens. That's impossible, Dr. Brightleaf said. But she was already pulling instruments out of her backpack, taking readings, collecting samples. The combinations you're describing, the chemical interactions alone, would revolutionize medicine, Sarah finished, if anyone remembered how to make them work together. I had to stop this, Doctor. Brightleaf was a scientist, a rational person. She had to see that this was madness. She's using some kind of hallucinogen, I said, making us see things that aren't there. None of this is real. Doctor. Brightleaf held up a small device that beeped steadily. I'm reading chemical compounds I've never seen before, she said. Complex alkaloids that shouldn't be able to exist in nature. Because I made of them, Sarah said. The old Cherokee medicine women knew how to guide plants, how to help them become more than what they were naturally. We knew that consciousness exists in all living things, and that a skilled healer could communicate with that consciousness. She reached out to touch a vine that was wrapped around Rodriguez's neck. The vine responded to her touch, growing new leaves that unfolded in perfect spirals. "You're talking about impossible things," I said. "Impossible to you," Sarah replied. "Natural to me. The difference is knowledge, Matthew. Knowledge that your people have spent centuries trying to destroy." Dr. Brightleaf was frantically taking notes, her scientific training warring with what she was seeing. "The molecular structures don't make sense," she muttered. "But they're definitely there. These plants are producing compounds that should be chemically impossible." "Touch one," Sarah said. "Feel what they're really like." "Don't," I warned. That's how she controls people, through the plants. But Dr. Brightleaf was already reaching out to touch a flower that looked like it was made of living emeralds. The moment her finger made contact, her eyes went wide. "I can feel it thinking," she whispered. "The plant, it has thoughts, memories." "Of course it does," Sarah said. "All living things do. Modern science just forgot how to listen." "Doctor." Brightleaf was changing. I could see it happening. Her movements became more fluid, more graceful. When she looked at me, her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. "She's right, Matthew." "Doctor," Brightleaf said. "These plants are alive in ways we never imagined. They're not just producing chemicals. They're creating art, beauty, intelligence." "She's poisoning you," I said desperately. "She's healing me, Doctor," Brightleaf replied. "Healing parts of my mind that I didn't even know were broken." Sarah walked over to where I stood, moving with the same fluid, grace that Dr. Brightleaf had developed. The plants around us swayed in rhythm with her steps. "You have a choice, Matthew," she said. "You can fight this and die like your friends. Or you can accept what you've learned and help me protect the new garden. I won't help you kill people. I'm not asking you to kill anyone. I'm asking you to stop other people from killing plants." She gestured, and the air filled with pollen again. But this time, instead of making me dizzy, it showed me visions. Images of pharmaceutical companies that could develop new medicines from Sarah's plants. Hospitals where people with incurable diseases could be healed. A world where the boundary between traditional and modern medicine disappeared. "This is what you destroyed," she said. "This is what we could build again." The visions were beautiful. They were also terrifying, because I was starting to believe they might be possible. "But first," Sarah said, "you have to prove that you understand. You have to show me that you've learned from your mistakes." She held out her hand. In her palm was a seed unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was black with veins of silver running through it, and it seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "Plant this," she said. "Let it grow inside you, the way knowledge should grow. Let it teach you what you need to know. And if I refuse?" She looked at Rodriguez and Williams, still standing among the flowers like scarecrows in a twisted garden. "Then you join them. And the next DEA team that comes looking will find 3 bodies instead of 2. Dr. Brightleaf was watching this exchange with fascination rather than horror. Whatever the plants had done to her mind, she was no longer on my side. I looked at the seed in Sarah's palm. It was beautiful and terrible, and I knew that if I took it, I would never be the same person I was now. But I also knew that if I didn't, I would die in this valley, and Sarah would continue killing anyone who threatened her new garden. "What will it do to me?" I asked. "It will teach you to hear what the plants are really saying," Sarah said. "It will show you the difference between destruction and protection. It will make you a guardian instead of a destroyer." I thought about my years as a DEA agent, burning gardens and arresting growers. I thought about Sarah's original garden, the irreplaceable plants I'd helped destroy. I thought about the possibility that there might be a different way, a way to protect both people and plants. I reached out and took the seed. The moment it touched my skin, I felt it burrow in like it was alive. Pain shot up my arm, followed by a warmth that spread through my entire body. The world exploded into colors and scents and sounds I'd never experienced before. I could hear the plants talking, not in words, but in chemical signals, electrical impulses, patterns of growth and decay that told stories older than human civilization. I could feel the vast network of root systems connecting every plant in the valley, sharing nutrients and information across impossible distances. And I could feel Sarah's presence in all of it. Not controlling the plants, but communicating with them, asking for their help rather than demanding their obedience. Now you understand, she said as the transformation completed itself. Now you can help me protect what we're building. I looked at my hands. The skin was still human, but I could see green veins just beneath the surface. I could feel the seed growing in my chest, sending out tendrils that connected me to every living thing in the valley. What am I now? I asked. You're a bridge, Sarah said, between the old ways and the new, between the Cherokee medicine traditions and modern botanical science, between those who would destroy and those who would protect. Doctor. Brightleaf was smiling now, her face radiant with understanding. This is incredible, she said, the potential for medical research alone. But it has to be protected, Sarah said firmly. Never again can we let ignorance destroy knowledge. Never again can we let fear triumph over wisdom. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate through the plant network in my chest. I was still Matthew Thornfield, forest ranger and former DEA agent. But I was also something new, a guardian of secrets that the world desperately needed but wasn't ready to understand. What happens now? I asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't terrifying. Now we teach you how to tend a proper garden. 6 months later, I filed my report on the deaths of Agents Rodriguez and Williams. The official cause was accidental poisoning from unknown plant toxins. The bodies were never found. Officially, they were assumed to have been carried away by wild animals. Dr. Brightleaf's botanical survey of the area concluded that the region contained several new species of medicinal plants with extraordinary pharmaceutical potential. Her recommendations led to the establishment of the Cherokee Medicinal Plant Preserve, a protected area where traditional medicine practitioners could work alongside modern researchers. The DEA was surprisingly easy to convince. When Dr. Brightleaf demonstrated the healing properties of just one of Sarah's plants, a compound that could treat drug addiction without the side effects of methadone, they became very interested in cooperation rather than destruction. I'm still a forest ranger, but now my job description includes liaison work with the Cherokee Nation and botanical researchers from around the world. I help coordinate studies that respect both traditional knowledge and modern scientific methods. Sarah Crowfeather doesn't appear in any official records. As far as the government knows, she died 3 years ago from burns suffered in the Henderson Valley raid. But sometimes, when researchers are struggling with a particularly difficult plant preparation, they find handwritten notes in their labs, helpy instructions written in Cherokee syllabary that solve problems modern science couldn't figure out. Dr. Brightleaf has become one of the leading researchers in ethnobotany, ECA, the study of how traditional cultures use plants for medicine. Her papers on Cherokee plant medicine have revolutionized several areas of pharmaceutical research. She's also my wife now. We were married in a traditional Cherokee ceremony in the hidden valley where this all began. The seed Sarah gave me is still growing inside me. I can feel it sometimes, especially when I'm deep in the forest, connecting me to the vast network of plant life that most people never notice. It doesn't hurt anymore. Instead, it feels like coming home to a family I never knew I had. I've learned to communicate with the plants, not through speech, but through chemical signals and electrical impulses. They tell me about the health of the forest, about pollution in the streams, about changes in climate that human instruments can't detect yet. I've become an early warning system for environmental problems that won't be visible to conventional science for years. But the most important thing I've learned is this. Knowledge isn't just information, it's relationship. The Cherokee medicine women didn't just study plants, they formed partnerships with them. They understood that healing comes not from forcing nature to obey human will, but from learning to work with natural processes that are already perfect. The DEA still conducts raids on illegal cultivation operations, but now they call me first, to make sure they're not destroying something irreplaceable. Most marijuana growers are still just people trying to make money from illegal drugs. But sometimes we find gardens like Sarah's, repositories of traditional knowledge that the world thought was lost forever. Those gardens, we protect. There are others, like Sarah out there, medicine people from different traditions who have learned to work with plants in ways that seem impossible to modern science. Some of them died protecting their knowledge from people like me. Some of them found ways to survive in hidden places, waiting for the world to become ready for what they have to teach. I help them when I can. I've become part of an unofficial network of guardians. Scientists, rangers, tribal elders, and others who understand that some kinds of knowledge are too valuable to lose. The Cherokee National Forest is different now. If you know how to look, the old boundaries between natural and supernatural, possible and impossible, have become more flexible. Plants grow in patterns that tell stories. Animals behave in ways that suggest intelligence beyond what biology textbooks describe. The line between magic and science has blurred until it's almost invisible. Most visitors don't notice any of this. They see a beautiful forest with interesting plant life and well-maintained trails. But sometimes, if they're very quiet and very respectful, they might hear singing in a language they don't recognize. They might see an old woman tending flowers that seem to glow with their own inner light. If that happens, they should leave an offering of tobacco at the base of the nearest oak tree and walk away quietly. Sarah appreciates visitors who understand proper manners, but she doesn't tolerate people who come to destroy rather than learn. The forest remembers everything, and some memories have very long roots.